Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem.
Here.
Mr. President.
Here, would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing today for remarks by Councilmember Chris Jerem. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, it's the time of year when we have a lot of people making big transitions in their lives, from people graduating from college and starting careers or going to professional school, from people in high school getting ready to go to college or launch a career, people going from grade schools to high schools. There's a whole lot of people that are making big new moves in our life. We had our youngest daughter graduate from college this weekend. It made me think about it. And there's a lot of excitement in the air. There's people who are, once again, from South Omaha, state champions. It's in another sport. So tip of the cap to you. But I heard the runner-up had 17 seniors on their team at Creighton Prep, 17. And all those people going exciting places and doing exciting things. So just time to celebrate, and if you know somebody, maybe you've been invited to a graduation party, 2 or 3, or one person told me 22 invites so far. It's time of year to be happy and celebrate and support those that are moving on to bigger and better things.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Omaha City Council. The council thanks you all for being with us today, and as a courtesy to those in attendance, we would ask you to turn off or mute any of your electronic devices. Before we begin the major portion of our program, we've got one proclamation we want to read today, so the floor belongs to Councilmember Vinnie Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Proclamation I'll be reading today will be with Public Works. Whereas Public Works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Omaha. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of the Public Works professionals, who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector. And whereas it is in the public's interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the city of Omaha to gain knowledge of and to maintain a progressive interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2019 marks the 59th annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association, and whereas Omaha's public works professionals are responsible for constructing, improving, maintaining, and protecting approximately 5,000 lane miles of public roadways, approximately 3,000 miles of storm and sanitary sewers, and are continuously modernizing our traffic control systems, parking and mobility systems, solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas the Omaha Public Works Department has been internationally recognized for both its snow and ice control program and its graffiti abatement program, and now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Omaha hereby designates the week of May 19th through May 25th, 2019 as Omaha Public Works Week. In witness whereof, the Omaha City Council has caused the official sale of the City of Omaha to be affixed on this 14th day of May, 2019.
Welcome, Public Works reps.
Welcome, Public Works members.
Thank you, members of City Council. Director Stubbe asked myself, Jim Tyler, City of Omaha Public Works, and the Assistant Director for Environmental Services. Myself and Todd Fisher will be saying a few words, if we may. First of all, I would like to thank the close to 250 hardworking men and women in the environmental side of Public Works, who work long hours around the clock every day to help provide a healthy environment to the citizens and protect the environment for our future generations. Talk about some of the divisions that I have responsibility for. Our water resource recovery facilities, that's our Papillion Creek wastewater facility and our Missouri River wastewater facility. Our treatment facilities and their employees are the last line of defense in protecting the Missouri River from the over 600,000 residential customers and over 1,300 commercial and industrial customers who send their wastes at us through the collection system. Both of these treatment facilities sustained extensive damage in this year's flood. The Papillion Creek facility, located in Sarpy County, is still recovering after this flood. In less than 2 months after that facility was abandoned, that location has gone from completely flooded without power, sustaining an estimated $35 million in damage, to next week we will be running at full treatment on all processes. Our sewer maintenance and flood control personnel operate and maintain a collection system that transports waste to those facilities. In addition, maintain the city's 13-mile flood control system. And of note, we were one of the only levees along the Missouri River that was not overtopped or did not fail in this catastrophic flood that we had this spring. I would like to mention, and Todd will follow up on this, that many of these employees that we are talking about have been working long, extended hours since January. We're all hands on deck. These were employees supporting, the environmental employees supporting the streets employees to get the snow plowed. And they went straight from that operation to a flood fight operation. And they went straight from that operation to a flood recovery operation. And I'd like to commend those employees that have been working those long hours for a long period of time. Our Environmental Quality Control Division. This is the group that maintains our solid waste and recycling contracts, providing oversight to over 140,000 residential customers for solid waste and recycling. Under that also is our compost operations and our land application program. We also have our quality program and our stormwater quality management program. This group also takes care of the sewer use fee and manages the low-income program for those that can't pay those fees. And last but not least, I'd like to mention our facilities management division. That division is responsible for the new construction, maintenance, and upkeep of all of our major city facilities, including libraries and the police and fire stations. All these individuals that I've mentioned work hard every day, largely unnoticed, long hours, and difficult and dirty working conditions, and I thank every one of them performing this service for the city.
Thank you, Jim. Todd Fitzer with Public Works. I get up in front of you for a lot of reasons, and today I'm very proud to represent the members of Public Works that are to be recognized through this effort this week. We have almost 600 employees in the transportation section, and they virtually touch and maintain everything that you see on the windshield of your car as you drive to and from work or wherever you're traveling within our city on those 5,000 lane miles of roads. This year's been a tough year. We've had a tough winter, which has led us to the pothole season that we're still addressing. But it's important to note that there's some very hard-working men and women out there that started working 12-hour days way back in January and February and worked actually days, weeks, and sometimes months. 12 hours on, 12 hours off, driving snow plows, working on our streets out there. Unlike some of the folks that Jim referenced, they are very much in the public eye. People see them as they're traveling about, and sometimes we're in the way, and sometimes those folks feel underappreciated, but they're very, very hardworking, and I'm very proud to stand up here today and represent those individuals. What a lot of people don't realize is the snowplow operators that work in the middle of the winter all night long so we can try to drive back and forth to work are the same men and women that are out working on the pothole effort today. Their efforts have not stopped. The demands on their time, time away from their families, and the dedication and hard work that we ask of them really has not stopped since it started to snow last fall. And so I want to recognize those very hardworking and talented folks that are with us. When that happens, I want to also recognize our fleet maintenance. When we're out there 24 hours a day plowing snow, our trucks break down, and our trucks need blades replaced and parts that go down. So those folks are working 24-hour shifts as well for sometimes weeks at a time. The folks with our signal technicians that Jim mentioned and the proclamation mentioned, everything that you see this time of year, we need to repaint all of our roads. The signs that get knocked down need to be replaced. The traffic signals maintained. Those folks are out there working very hard and just don't know what we do without all of them. This time of year, when construction starts up, our construction managers are out there, oftentimes very unpopular when we open a new construction site. And I want to recognize their efforts and thank you, Council, for working with us on those challenges and coming to us with that. Our parking division and design division make it possible to think years in advance, parking structures and projects that are coming up, tens of millions of dollars a year in projects that are coming up that are 2, 3, 4 years out that those folks are working very hard on. And we do a lot of public outreach associated with those so that we can plan ahead, so that the members of the public, 132nd Center, 156th Street, they know years in advance that we're coming out to do a project in those areas and they can prepare for it. The business owners, the residents in those areas. Our right-of-way department similarly. So I just wanted to kind of go through that list of very talented and hardworking men and women that are out there that oftentimes have to hold up to some public scrutiny and criticism and continue to do it because of the love for our city. I want to take this opportunity as I close to think about those workers that are out on the street. As you know, in the last several years, we've had a fatality. We've had people seriously and gravely injured. To remind the public of the folks that are out there working in the streets, that they have families to go home to. And please pay attention, put your phone down, and think about those folks as you're driving into those areas and you see the flashing lights. Absolutely last, but certainly not least, I couldn't be up here today without recognizing our Director of Public Works, Bob Stubbe. I know I speak soundly for Jim and I, saying that, Bob, we appreciate your leadership and we couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much for your attention for this group on this day.
Congratulations, Public Works. Madam Clerk.
Items 6 to 8 can be considered together for Ida Point North, located southwest of 180th and Ida Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 6, an ordinance to rezone this property from AG District to R4 District, high density. Item 7, a resolution to approve the final plat for Ida Point North. Item 8, a resolution to approve the Ida Point North subdivision agreement.
Public hearing on agenda items numbers 6 through 8 are today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon, Joe Zadina with Lamper Nearson here representing Elkhorn Public Schools to answer any questions on items 6, 7, or 8.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve items 6 through 8. There are no lights. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
6 to 8 are approved, 7 to 0. Items 9 to 13 can be considered together for Holland Hilltop Addition, located at 209 South 49th Avenue. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 9, an ordinance to approve a PUR overlay district in an R6 district and to approve the development plan. Item 10, an ordinance to repeal the PUD overlay district for this property. Item 11, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat for Holland Hilltop Addition. Item 12, a resolution to approve the final plat for Holland Hilltop Addition. Item 13, a resolution to approve the Holland Hilltop Addition subdivision agreement.
Public hearing on agenda items numbers 9 through 13 are today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon, Tim Holland with Design Development, 119 South 49th Avenue. I'm here representing Design Development and the development of these 9 new townhomes, and will answer any questions should they arise. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve items 9 through 13. No lights. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
9 through 13 are approved, 7 to 0. Items 14 to 19 can be considered together for Arbor Woods, located at 9300 Arbor Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. B is communications in opposition. Item 14, an ordinance to rezone this property from DR District to DR District. Item 15, an ordinance to rezone this property from DR District to R4 District, high density. Item 16, an ordinance to rezone this property from DR District to R6 District. Item 17, an ordinance to approve a PUD overlay district in an R6 district for this location and to approve the development plan. Item 18, a resolution to approve the final plat for Arbor Woods. Item 19, a resolution to approve the Arbor Woods subdivision agreement.
Public hearing on agenda items numbers 14 through 19 are today. Proponents, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, council members. My name is Rick Anderson. I'm a lawyer with Croker Huck Law Firm at 2120 South 72nd Street, here on behalf of the applicant. Representing the applicant today is Nate Dodge and Sam Cooper. Also with us are engineers for the project, the Lamper-Nearson firm, and Mike McMeekin is here. Stanley J. Howe from Stanley J. Howe Architects is also here with respect to the PUD and the development of the multi-family residential portion of it. I would like to take a couple cleanup items up front. We submitted some documents through a thumb drive to the city clerk's office the other day. I want to be sure that you took note of them. They are all public documents that the city has seen before and has in their files. The first one is the final traffic study that has been analyzed by the Public Works Department. It'll be referred to here, but as you can see, it's a fairly thick document, and it'll be part of the journal record for all of these items, including particularly the final plat, but the subdivision agreement and all of the rezonings and PUD. The second thing is the floodplain analysis for the Arbor Woods redevelopment. This was the analysis that was undertaken to determine the hydraulic nature of the fill permit that was requested and how this development would affect this property and other properties. It will be referenced by Mike McMeekin from the Lamper-Nearson Group, as it was, and I know it was discussed at the pre-council meeting this morning, so I want to be sure you knew that was in the record and referred to. What is in the record, but not with respect to all of the other items, are several of the exhibits. These come from the subdivision agreement. We'd like to be sure that you analyze these with respect to each of the projects, and the list of the exhibits here are a copy of the final plat, which is attached to many of the minutes, but also the paving and sanitary sewer plan, the storm sewer and grading plan, the sediment erosion and erosion control plan, the tree mitigation plan, and the post-construction stormwater maintenance plan. In particular, there are certain topographical features shown on the storm sewer and grading plan that I think you have noted before, but we want to be sure you take note of these with respect to items 17 and 18, and indeed all of the items on the agenda. These have not been submitted yet, so take a moment. One other item, which it is unclear from the documents that it is in the record, and so I'd like to submit it, is a letter from the Papio, Missouri Natural Resources District. We've referred to it in the meeting this morning, but, or not in the meeting this morning, but in conversations about this project. The City of Omaha is aware of this and has it, I believe. The City of Omaha has accepted the NRD's approval of the plans, not only for the final plat, but for the for the PUD plan, and so we'd like to make sure this is in the record as well. It provides that they have no objections to the plan from a channel maintenance and easement perspective, which were the items that they had addressed in the comments to the preliminary plat, and they are cleaning that up here. And I appreciate you allowing me to take a minute for that purpose. We're here on what has turned out to be a long-term project. It's taken about 2 years to get to this point for the final approval of the plat and of the various rezonings. And with that, the rezonings are showing up very well. I want to take a few minutes just to acquaint you with the general area so that we can, I know that there are some people here who want to speak in opposition to this, and I would like to put this in a proper context. This area is located on the southeast corner, excuse me. I should turn this so that it is pointing to the north. The development is of the Sunset Hills Valley Golf Course. That golf course was closed, and it was purchased in its entirety by the applicant. In this case, it runs in a north, from the northwest to the southeast. It's on the most appropriately defined as the corner of 93rd and Arbor, but it's in the area of the 90th Street to the east and West Center Road to the west. It's defined by the Big Papio Creek along the west and the school property of Sunset Hills School along to the east. This will be developed. We put it on this map so you can see the existing neighborhood is single family to the east and north. It is generally a commercial apartment and multifamily to the south and east. As it approaches the 93rd Street intersection, there's a large vacant parcel that used to be a generally commercial area. It's up for redevelopment at some time in the future, but it'll remain to see. Basically on the far boundary on the southwest portion is the Big Papio Creek. Across the street is a city park, Toll Park, and Sunset Hills School property is to the north and west of this property. So there's single family that is existing on the north and the east of the property. It is with this in mind that the development was determined to put single-family housing adjacent to the existing single-family housing. You'll see a new street that connects the existing streets of Arbor Street and 93rd Street. You'll see that the multifamily portion of this is nestled in away from any other existing properties to the south and west. There are four outlots, excuse me. There's one outlot at the entrance at 93rd and Arbor that establishes open space and kind of an entrance area. There's another long, thin outlot that goes from approximately the 93rd and Arbor, but it's really established a little ways in, that goes along the boundary line of the single-family housing to the north and west, and the boundary of the new single-family housing between, we'll call it Arbor Street, up to 93rd Street. There is also an outlot D. Those are A and B, you'll hear those. And outlot D is to the back of the property. It is a large portion that will remain in open space. This is a portion that's in the floodplain, closer to the floodway. It is not being touched and will remain in the open space area. Outlot C is the portion nestled in behind to the south and west of the multifamily development property. That is for the stormwater detention and quality basins that's necessary in order to keep within the city context of keeping storm runoff maintained until it can be let go in the proper fashion. The multifamily is then in Lot 38, which is in the middle here. There are 4 units that are proposed in the first phase, and there's a 5th and 6th unit that are shadowed in, nestled to the north and to the south and west, no closer to any other property. The multifamily are well away from any single family except those in the development, and they will be provided with adequate protection and a nice connection to the new single-family properties. I'd like to provide you with a bit of a conceptual map. Again, let me put up north. This should be taken in the context of conceptual, but it is to show the amount of open space. The A, B, C, and D outlots are arranged here. Those outlots all taken together keep open space at about 60% of the original purchase. The total size of this property is 49.3 acres. So 60% is being retained as open space, either as buffer or as open space next to the creek. Excuse me, as I came up, I shuffled this one.
Rick?
Yes.
When you continue, can you move the microphone down a little?
Sure.
Yeah.
You have trouble
So,
hearing
yeah,
me?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely. So the preliminary plat here for approval is to, again, we're asking for a rezoning of lots 1 through 37. There are 37 single-family lots, and you can see those as I described going along the east, north, and a little bit around to the west side of the property. The multifamily units are in lot 38, which is nestled in the middle, and the rest is open space, either as detention basins or as buffering to either the creek or the single family to the north. The multifamily units will be constructed 3 stories high. They're going to be 35 feet maximum in height, the same maximum as any of the single-family houses within the development or outside of the development. That's a fairly standard height limitation for single-family units. The units themselves will have this appearance. There'll be brickwork that's available, hardy board that's available outside living spaces at the corners of each of the units. Each of the buildings, here's another perspective, that unit from the front, and another perspective of these units from the back. These units are all constructed similarly. They are 3 stories high. Each unit will have 3 studio apartments, approximately 10 single-family apartments, and approximately 22 I said single-family, I meant 1-bedroom apartments and 22 2-bedroom apartments, each of the 3 floors. The units will be market value units. We're expecting them to be people who have connections with the neighboring school district. District 66 has a school, as we said, immediately to the west of the property. There will be a connection to that school, private connection from the sidewalks that are part and parcel of our subdivision that will flow down and directly access the school property. Other people in the neighboring area, not necessarily in this development, can also access through the public street and the public sidewalks in order to walk to school. So those to the north and east can take those rather than walking on the open streets. The access to the property will be primarily through Arbor Street and 93rd. We have connected these streets through the 93rd and Arbor. There'll be a 92nd Street. All of this will be developed with a cul-de-sac to the north and a connection to the existing 93rd Street to the south. That will allow access along Dorcas, allow access along Shirley, along 93rd Street, all of which are proper infrastructure in place for many years. This is a beautiful infill project and will use infrastructure that is in place now. All the public utilities are in place. We are located in an area where there is adequate, not only adequate, but superior probably, shopping for necessities, food, restaurants, bookstores, pharmacies, that sort of thing, at the 93rd Street and Center area. We have analyzed through the traffic study that we've referred to, we've analyzed the traffic impact. That traffic impact is viewed to be normal, not strong. I'll ask Mike McMeekin to step up here for a moment to talk to you about the traffic impact, but that will keep all of the current streets at a level that is consistent with the level of service that they are now. It's not going to overload the streets. We've heard comments in prior meetings that it's going to be multiples of what they have existing now. That's simply not true. Mike, do you want to stand up for just a minute and talk about the traffic portion, please?
Mr. President, members of the council, Mike McMeekin with Lamprey Nearson. With respect to the traffic, the study was prepared quite a while ago, approved by Public Works. I think the key outcome from the study was in looking at all the potential impacted intersections, which includes 3 intersections along 90th, Dorcas, Shirley, and Pacific, or in West Center, and then also looking at 93rd and Pacific. When you add in all of the traffic from the development, all the intersections operate at acceptable levels for an urban setting. No additional improvements at any of these intersections is warranted. So if you would like additional details on the traffic study, I can address that in the questions period. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're here on the final plat. The final plat has been recommended to you by the Planning Department, as has the preliminary plat. The final plat has been recommended to you by the Planning Board after the preliminary plat was commended. It took about a year to get through some of the provisions that we had to satisfy, some of the conditions. There were 12 conditions to the recommendation of the plat. Some of them were rather straightforward, some of them were more difficult. A couple of those had to do with the fill permits and the development of the property in the proper manner that we have. For that reason, we did a hydraulic study that was modeled according to a model requested by the Papio, Missouri NRD. The two people involved in that were the Papio, Missouri River NRD and the City of Omaha. After a consultation on that and in response to our application for a fill permit, that the permit was granted. We do have a fill permit now from the City of Omaha that was granted in mid-2018. It has taken a little bit of time to get the rest of the documents together, but we now have permits from the state of Nebraska. We have provided 2 letter of map amendments to FEMA. We have met with the NRD on numerous occasions, not only for the fill permit, but also for the development of this property in general, the development of trails. We've talked to them about it. I don't think anything is distinct and happening yet on that, but we've agreed to be cooperative with them. We have then gone through and as part of this, we have the PUD, which allows for the buildings to be built as shown, with the footprints as shown on the PUD application and map. As part of that process, we went to the Zoning Board of Appeals to obtain waivers for certain development restrictions on the individual lots. Those had to do with buffer yards to our own outlot D and to our own outlot C. So any of those waivers, which were granted 5-0 after a hearing with Zoning Board of Appeals, those waivers are in place. We have also a limitation or a grant of a waiver to allow the apartments to be closer to the street to match the apartments on the single-family housing setbacks on the other side. So the setbacks of the apartments match those. We have gone through that process and have those approvals. There is some litigation involved in that, but that is not objecting to anything today, and we're moving forward because we have the approvals we need. We are here asking for the approval of the zoning for the single-family lots to R4, the approval of the multifamily to allow an R6 zoning with limitations to height and all, with a PUD connected to it. The PUD takes into account not only Lot 38, but also the Outlot C and also the Outlot D. Remembering Outlot C is the detention basin area, and Outlot D is a large area to the south and west, which acts as continued open space. It is a request for approval of those items as well, and we have the zoning, the plat itself, and we have the subdivision agreement, which we've worked back and forth with the Public Works Department, Ryan Haas in particular, who coordinates those. But with that, we are asking for approval of these items. Stan Howe is here and available if you'd like to talk any more about the planned unit development and the design of the units. Also, Mike McMeekin is here to talk any more about the floodplain analysis and the impact of that. We'll be glad to take any questions now, or there may be some comments afterwards, and we'd like a chance to respond to some people that we know are here.
Thank you.
Are there any questions now?
There may be some questions a little later. Thank you
Okay,
for right
thank
now.
you.
Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard?
Which one? This one? Let me get that. Mike McMeekin would like to make a couple comments with respect to the floodplain.
Thank you.
Mr. President, members of the council, Mike McMeekin again with Lamprey Nearson. With respect to the floodplain issues, I'll just address those as briefly as I can right now. We have complied with all of the City of Omaha requirements regarding development in the floodplain, including preparing a detailed analysis of the floodplain impacts of the project. It's important, I think, to understand that we are designing the project as is commonly done in this type of floodplain project, so that all of the buildable lots, both single-family and multifamily, will be removed from the floodplain through filling. As a result of the work we have done, the floodplain development permit for the project, which would allow that filling, was issued by the city on July 24th, 2018, and that permit was supported by the Papio Missouri River NRD. An important fact that we know from our work on the floodplain is that no additional properties outside of our project will be placed in the floodplain or required to purchase flood insurance as a result of the project. And like the traffic, there are many, many details that I could get into, but I won't do that except to answer any questions that you may have later. Thank you again.
Any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, council members. My name is Ryan Kuhnhart, and I'm an attorney with Dvorak Law Group, and I represent a group of the Sunset Hills neighborhood who are in opposition to this development. Many of these issues have been discussed in front of the City Council through testimony and letters, also at the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Board. But what I want to do today is stand up and run through some of those issues again, and I want to ask the City Council to delay its final vote, as there's still many unanswered questions, and there's a lot of inconsistencies that I'm going to point out throughout this project that still remain today. First off, there is pending litigation over this. We do have a lawsuit filed with the District Court of Douglas County relating to NP Dodge's requesting the Zoning Board of Appeals and the setbacks with the floodplain. There's pending litigation that will not be decided for months in that case. We think that it'd be appropriate to wait until that litigation is decided one way or another, so we aren't back before the Zoning Board of Appeals getting a different waiver if we are successful on that litigation. Another major issue that we've had is the finalization of the floodplain in this project. If you look at this project, it initially started out as a PUR, or a planned unit redevelopment, and today, under item 17, you will be voting on a planned unit development. If you look at Omaha City Code, specifically section 55-655, subsection B2L, it allows for only 25% of the floodplain to be developed if the project is a development, not a redevelopment. As I said before, and I'm going to show you some examples, this project started out as a redevelopment. Now we're dealing with a development. And it is our position that the City Council does not have the authority to approve a development that's based on an approval of an underlying floodplain that does not meet the city's own municipal code. Members of our group have requested information on how this waiver was granted. We don't have that information. The city has allowed development in 45% of the floodplain, which would exceed the level allowed, as I said, 25% by about twofold. Additionally, there have been procedural issues and errors leading to the public being inadequately informed about this project. First, the initial application for the PUD was submitted late to the city, which resulted in the application to move forward despite the city not taking its own recommended time to fully analyze the project. In addition, what I want to talk about too is how the PUR versus the PUD, the confusion still exists. And what I'd first like to look at is it's in your packet under item 17A, and what it talks about is the ordinance to approve the PUD. If you look at this memo, which is dated November 29th of 2017 from the planning director, and if I highlighted the portion that's important here, is that the applicant has decided to resubmit its request as a PUD. And again, this is on November 29th of 2017. So at that point, we thought that we were dealing with a PUD. Then through public records requests that members of our group made, you go to an email from Jennifer Taylor, who's an assistant Omaha city attorney, on January 9th of 2018, in request to a question whether the municipal code that I just talked about can be modified or waived. Ms. Taylor states that it's a planning department's assessment that this project is a redevelopment, yet you are here today voting on a development. And why does that matter? It matters because everything that has been submitted here today talks about a PUR instead of a PUD and the different standards applicable to it. In addition, this development will drastically change this neighborhood around 93rd and the center area. And what our group is doing is they're doing their diligence. And throughout that process, we've requested multiple sets of public records. And if you look at as late as May 9th of 2019, we still don't have confirmation from the city that we have received all the records that have been requested relating to this project. Other issues that I think are important to touch on and what our group thinks are important to touch on, Mr. Anderson gave me a copy of the map here. And what our neighborhood, what the Sunset Hills neighborhood is primarily concerned with is the public safety of the residents in the area. And if you look at this, as it was said before, there will be 37 single-family homes and approximately 210 multi-unit residences with this project right here. 90th Street is over here, Center is to the south. And if you look, the only access points for this development are off Arbor Street from 90th Street, and then to the north, 93rd Street will be extended to connect with the existing 93rd Street. And Sunset Hills Elementary is right over here on the northwest side. And even though this new development will have sidewalks as required by code, none of this area has sidewalks, none of it. So, as I said before, you either have to get in and out of this development from Arbor Street or 93rd Street. So you're going to have a significant amount of kids going to school at Sunset Hills over here, having to cross 93rd Street and all these other areas to get over there without sidewalks. Additionally, there is question about the flooding here, and I know the applicant has said that has been addressed by fill. The problem is if you fill, that water has to go somewhere to the north of the fill. So if the fill is done around this area, there still are risks of flooding to the north, as the water has to go somewhere with the more fill that you add to the south. In the Sunset Hills neighborhood, this isn't the first time that they've been through this. In the early 1980s, the neighborhood wanted to ensure that traffic from One Pacific Place development was not pushed into the neighborhood, or that there was additional traffic. And at that point, there were conversations about potentially adding sidewalks to the area. We have not had any conversations. We've tried to work with the applicant on this. We'd like to see sidewalks or infrastructure improvements made to this area with the school right there. And eventually, who's going to bear that burden will be the Omaha taxpayers, as we have to deal with the addition of potential sidewalks, the addition of potential speed bumps, and potential issues with the lack of infrastructure. And I know Rich Onken, who can't be here today, he's traveling. He has been a great voice for the group. And as he discussed in his letter to the city attorney that's been provided, this development is not architecturally compatible with the current Sunset Hills neighborhood. Another issue is lower home values that I'm here to address. Initially, and I think that in total there was an estimate that this development would add $40 million to the city's tax valuation, but I know Mr. Onken and others have testified about this before, that if you remove this green space, even if you keep part of the green space, removing this green space and not having your home next to a golf course results in lower home valuations, and there has been testimony submitted before that testimony will potentially wipe out at least half of that benefit of the development. And additionally, too, there's issues with the density. As we've testified prior, the multifamily apartments, per the Omaha master plan, it's not compatible, the construction of these with the master plan. And what we have here is we have approximately 9 acres for development and 36 acres of floodplain. And it's our position and belief that the density here that has allowed this project to move forward is divided out over the floodplain, not just the development area. I want to look at a couple things. These are from the Omaha master plan, and I know I kind of talked about the inconsistencies, but if you look at this is, if you look at goal 1, now the master plan sets standards that restrict development in the floodplains and minimize the effects of the floods on the neighboring areas. And this article, or this portion from the master plan, specifically talks about the streams from the Papio Creek. And what we're doing here is we're allowing development on those areas that the master plan says should not be developed. One other thing, too, is we're taking away a green space in the middle of Omaha. And if you look at Goal 7 of Omaha City's master plan, we want a green image for Omaha. And instead, we're taking that and we're turning it into multifamily homes and single-use homes in a rather dense part of Omaha. We have presented alternatives, and at other hearings, you've heard that there is a donor who is willing to purchase the park and turn it into a public park. There is, if you look at November and December 2018 planning board meeting minutes or transcripts and the January 2018 city council hearing transcripts, some of the public officials agreed that that would be a good idea to turn this into a green space. We have the money, we have the donor to do it, let's keep it as it is. And then Mr. Onken, who I talked about earlier, has proposed a detailed plan to the city that would allow for this development within the 25% of the floodplain, which is allowed by city code, with the rest of the land being sold to this local donor for a public park. All this would be consistent with the master plan, with the city ordinances, and would accomplish the goals of still letting this development through. So in conclusion, and there's other members of the neighborhood that are going to speak, we would urge the city council to postpone its vote today until the legal challenges to the Zoning Board of Appeals waiver is concluded, and to address the additional issues that we have brought forth to you today. I do have a letter that I would like to submit for the record. This is from one of the neighbors, Stephen Taylor. He was planning on coming today, but he is home with a sick kid. So he emailed this to me and asked me to submit that. So with that, I'll invite other members of the neighborhood to the podium, and I will step back and be available for questions.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard? Yeah, if you could hand that letter to the clerk,
Yeah.
please. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, city council members, excuse me, hopefully I'll not come across too loud here, but my name is Donald Geiger. I live at 1636 South 99th Street. I ask that my comments, and I have a copy of them that I can submit to the clerk, be placed in the public record. I go on record as being opposed to granting approval of agenda item 2019-14, Arbor Woods, which permits rezoning in preparation for construction of single-family, multi-family, as you heard before, at the Sunset Valley Golf Club near 93rd and Arbor. My family purchased our single-family residence in 1979, nearly 40 years ago, and we have lived there since then. My kids attended Sunset Hills Elementary School, which we've seen here, and Westside High School. That's not germane to this particular discussion today. Our home is located near the intersection of 99th Street and Walnut Streets, property that is partially within the Big Pavilion Creek floodway and floodway fringe. Our property is in those zones. Our home is, so that you can appreciate the geographic nature of Sunset Hills and Happy Hollow Hills. I'm submitting a number of photographs. You will be thankful that I'm not going to show them all today, but I will give them to the clerk to be placed in the record. For several years, I have served as the president of the Sunset Hills Happy Hollow Hills Neighborhood Association, which is recognized by the City of Omaha Planning Department. This association's boundaries include the 49-acre property formerly owned by the Sunset Valley Golf Club, as a private club that has been in existence since the early 1960s. During that time, said property has remained essentially as undeveloped green space, a golf course, including a private clubhouse, and it is situated in the Pavilion Creek watershed, which is, and I would quote some of our discussions with the NRD, perhaps the most flood-prone area in Nebraska, the Pavilion Creek watershed. There have been 12 letters of protest from owners of property adjacent to the property in question filed with the city clerk. My sketch is not quite as nicely done, but perhaps you can, again, and I'll be repeating, talk about Sunset Valley Golf Club in the center of this portion, the elementary school up here, the lots in red that are outlined in red or highlighted in red belong to 12 letters of protest from owners of properties adjacent to the property in question filed with the city clerk. These letters met the requirement of the Omaha Code, Section 55590, adoption of district, and Nebraska Revised Statute 14405, building zones, boundaries, change, or repeal, and includes how a protest is filed and whether it can be accepted. The language included in the above suggests that the government bodies protect the health, quote, protect the health, safety, and general welfare of its citizens. It recognizes, and the government bodies should recognize that flood losses are caused by, again, quote, the cumulative effect of obstructions in floodplains. And these the requests act and the government bodies act to protect individuals from buying lands which are unsuited because of flood hazard. These 12 letters have met the 20% legal threshold, which requiring a 50% supermajority vote of the City Council. The city clerk initially ruled that the city code and state law do not apply to protests, in this case, at the recommendation of the planning department. We believe that this finding is not that one that I just mentioned, is not in accordance with the city comprehensive or master plan. Therefore, we would like the records of this hearing today to show that we are objecting to this ruling concerning these letters of protest, and they should be allowed in this particular case. Point number 2 has to do with duty of our civic bodies. The state legislature has assigned the responsibility to adopt, administer, and enforce floodplain management in our area to Douglas County and the city of Omaha. The governmental responsibilities within this regulation include this language. Single-family houses will not have a basement living space, living quarters. It is stated under the general causes of flood losses that the effect of obstructions in floodplains is to cause increases in flood heights and velocities and the occupancy of flood hazard areas by vulnerable uses. It is, to make that clear, the effect of, it's stated that the occupancy of flood hazard areas by vulnerable uses, which would be housing, single family housing and multiple family housing. Therefore, as a resident of this same area, Sunset Hills, and being directly affected by the proposed changes of this agenda item, zoning changes allowed addition of fill materials. The opening we object to in the opening of 93rd Street and 94th Street. As you notice, 94th Street is the street that comes down near to the elementary school property, and 93rd Street is the one that goes directly up towards Pacific. And I think, with all respect to the traffic studies, I think that drivers will always take the path of least resistance when they want to get out on Pacific Street and get home, and that would be 94th Street and 93rd Street. In order, my family has been, we've lived here for almost 40 years. My family has been fearful 5 or 6 times while living on 99th Street and has shared that fear with our neighbors. In our time, there have been times when the big papio has actually come into our yard, and we have photographs of that if you want to see them later on. We don't need to look any further. Our home is our home is our savings and our security. So I'm concerned by the fact that this is going to change, and we found years ago when we had some other flooding studies done that runoff from green spaces or spaces that are paved that are paved can have an effect upstream as well as downstream from that particular location. We don't need to look further, as has been mentioned here earlier. We don't need to look further than the evening news to see how flooding affects people financially and emotionally. We do not need to look further than last Sunday's Omaha World Herald to have a better understanding of what may well be in our future, and look further than Arbor Woods, which raises some buildings nearly 11 feet above the present grade. Thank you all for your attention and interest in our concerns.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard?
Hi, I'm Katie Whites, and I didn't really think I was going to talk today, but I live at 1610 South 91st Avenue. My parents bought that house in 1977. I've lived there all but 15 years, and belong to Sunset Hills Golf Course, learned to golf there, love that place. We take our little dog down and run him around in the golf course area. When I found out that the golf course had sold, I was like, what? We can't let that go. And I saw the handmade signs about going to the, we can go to the meetings and talk about it. And I was like, oh, And things moved on and progressed, and other things were happening in my life, as it is wont to do. But my daughter walks down 91st Avenue, down 91st to Shirley, down 91st to Arbor to go to Westside Middle School, and that's something we haven't heard about today, which is why I thought I better bring that up. When you go to Westside Middle School to pick up those kids or to drop them off on Arbor Street, they come down in floods. There are no sidewalks. It's very unsafe. It's very scary, especially since the cars are going past each other and there's lines to pick them up and all that sort of thing. And when my daughter walks home, she walks home via 91st Avenue. This kind of construction and traffic is very worrisome. The only place that she can cross that's safe from our house is at the intersection of 90th and Arbor. Additionally, I love Mike McMeekin, so please don't think I am dismissing what you have said, but the streets are so bad in my area, and don't worry, our neighborhood association is working on, doing what we have to do to pay to read whatever it is, but they're so bad in our area that I currently never turn down 91st Avenue to get to my own house. I go down 93rd, or I go down 96th, where there's a light off Pacific Street. I don't drive on Poppleton. I don't drive on Woolworth. I drive to 93rd and Hickory, and then I drive up Hickory and backtrack back to my house north on 91st Avenue. The roads are not safe in that area. I am all for affordable housing. I'm for, increased tax revenues for the West Side School District. I'm all for that sort of thing. However, really right now, this doesn't seem safe. Now, I don't know anything about flooding or anything of that nature, except that I have lived there except for about 12 years. Since 1977, and that creek floods, and it has done it over and over and over again, and you can, walk on the trail that goes right along by there, even as recently as last spring, and it's muddy and terrible, and, people keep telling me that the way the floodplain is set up is similar to Houston, so it doesn't even really matter, here, it's all going to get pushed either north or south with the fill. I don't really understand that part, but I just want to say, please, with these inconsistencies, with all the unfortunate things that I guess happen when people communicate with the city in different, and you guys do great work. I know you have a huge job. But things, get confused, get lost, and it seems like it hasn't been a reasonable way to move forward. Not a straightforward way, not a transparent way, a lot of back talk, and also just the idea, the woman who has agreed to buy the park, she's not doing it for redevelopment. She's doing it so we can have a green space and an all-access area. And she is a wonderful West Side graduate. I mean, she is devoted to that community, and she wants it to be a great space for us. My husband, I wanted him to send me this ahead of time. He's always telling me that 98% of Omaha is, and outside of 2 miles outside of Omaha is non-natural surfaces, and that's why, Omaha is so hard to deal with geographically. We don't have all the pretty things. I, of course, I love even my backyard, but we have to keep some green space, please. I know how important parks are and pools and those sorts of things, and we've got to keep that green space, and we've got to keep the area safe for the babies to walk around. Okay, I've probably talked too long. And also, I love NP Dodge, so I'm not anti-NP Dodge either. I just really want to keep my babies safe and keep the neighborhood great. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard?
Yeah, my name is Hank Klauschi, and I live at 9812 Walnut, and a lot of my things have been covered already, so I'm going to try to be brief about this. I live upstream from the Sunset Valley Golf Course, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak out against the MP Dodge Arbor Woods development. I, along with many neighbors, are frustrated and disappointed at the lack of answers and transparency, as our lawyer has already said, we have experienced during this 2-year process. At times, I feel that city officials have made the decision to skirt the guidelines and that were put into place to protect us as citizens of Omaha. We all knew that MP Dodge was not going to act in the best interest of our neighborhood, but we did feel that the city would listen to our concerns and at least give us a fair shake. As you know, the neighborhood has a plan to keep the golf course as a green space, which we need. Such a green space would provide protection from future flood events. The Omaha Master Plan provides such a green space. We've already heard that's been changed to allow this development to happen. I'm going to skip over some stuff that I already had about the 25%. And I feel like there's been some impropriety by the planning board and members of MP Dodge where we are that we are all concerned about. At the very beginning of this process, MP Dodge website was advertising single-family villas before the first steps were approved by the planning board. They seemed to be sure of the success of the development from the start. The Sunset Hills board members had an employee that also works for MP Dodge, so this was kind of a sweetheart deal. It was bought before the property was on the market or anyone knew it was going to be for sale. The country club members were not informed of the second offer that was made for the property by a private citizen and the plans to keep it a green space. I know some of the people that were on that belonged to the country club, and they weren't allowed to even consider that. So, and a member of the planning board is also an employee of MP Dodge and a host of a local radio station. And he was recusing himself from voting, and yet he did advertise those same villas on his radio program. So I think that's kind of a conflict of interest. How can citizens fight such development when the city allows this kind of behavior? When our neighborhood contacted the mayor's office, we were told that the mayor had nothing to do with this. Yet we have documentation that proves that there was coordination between the mayor's office and Nate Dodge. When MP Dodge went before the Zoning Board of Appeals to decrease the setbacks, they said that the floodplain created a practical difficulty without providing supporting evidence. MP Dodge knew what they were getting into when they bought this property. They argued that a change in the setbacks would also decrease fill, which in turn would save money and also create less flood risk. Their previous stand was that the development would not increase flood risk at all. They only cited flood risk as a concern when it worked to benefit them. The ZBA also told us to stick to the setback arrangement when we tried to bring other things up, as opposed to oppose the development. But yet someone on the board brought up the problem of blight if this development wasn't made, which was something that happened way early in this process. Somebody in the planning board said it would be blighted, or I think the MP Dodge's lawyer said it would be blight. And that's not true. So they didn't even stick to their own procedures. We have also, and somebody already talked about the notarized petitions, okay, that were denied. In summary, I would like to encourage you to ask questions of your planning board and zoning boards before making this final vote, so postpone it. This issue is too important to rubber stamp. There will be consequences for your vote, and remember the next election coming up too. And finally, as I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, my house is in the floodplain. During the flood last March, my backyard was underwater. My wife and I had to dig a trench in the snow to stop the water from flooding my house. We were lucky enough to channel the water to the sewer drains about 200 feet away. We avoided damage to my house. However, in the process of doing the trenching, my wife fell and broke her ankle and tore ligaments in her knee. She has been laid up now for the past 2 months due to this flood. How much worse will the next flood be if the MP Dodge development is allowed to go ahead? Are you willing to back up your yes vote for this development with a guarantee that this development will not result in increased flooding in our community, and my house in particular? And I have a picture here that I took, and it's just on my little phone, but anyway, there's my backyard. This is our neighbor's yard. That's the guy behind me, and this is my yard with 2 feet of water in it after that event in March. It's a total lake. And I got, the flood got within about 12 feet of my back patio, which would have gone directly into my house. We do have bears in the yard also, you can see. There's the street where I had to, there's the trench we built. And this is going to happen again. I know it is. No matter what they say at the NRD, I've talked to them too. They play the party line and say it won't happen, but it will. Thank you.
Are there any other
wish to be heard?
Hi, my name is George Penke, and me and my wife live along Dorcas Street, and this letter was written by her, probably more educated than me in that sense. We live along Dorcas Street, right across from the development that Nate Dodge is proposing. Unfortunately, what seems to be the most important thing about the new neighborhood development is how to make more revenue for a group of real estate moguls and some revenue for the city. For God's sakes, where do we draw the lines where it comes to health and safety of our citizens? If you don't care about our children, our families enjoying a beautiful park, increased flooding in the area, and having habitats for delicate ecosystems, maybe it's time to talk about you and your family's health. Although we would all like to be rich and create money for our community, we must also start caring about our health and the amount of pollutants that are going into the environment due to a lack of trees and green space in our city. Fact is, Omaha, Nebraska is rated one of the worst cities to live in for allergies. Why are we not doing anything to fix this terrible rating, which is way deters families and individuals moving from the area? In 2013, in the Asthma and Allergy Foundation America Annual Report, we were rated number 13 out of 15 worst cities to live in for allergies and asthma. Less people moving into our city also means less revenue for our city. So why are the needs of a few outweighing the needs of many? The importance of trees and green turf, shrubs, and animal habitats. Trees provide so many wonderful benefits for heavily populated metro areas. Air quality. Large trees, a big tree removes approximately 60 to 70 times the pollution than a small tree. Removes smoke, dirt, dust, car emissions, and other dangerous pollutants from the air. One tree can remove 26 pounds of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere annually, equaling 11,000 miles of car emissions. Another study showed that 1 acre of trees has the ability to remove 13 tons of particles and gases annually. 2,500 square feet of turf absorb carbon monoxide from the air and releases enough oxygen for a family for a year. It also reduces energy consumption by countering the warming effects of paved street and surfaces, recharging groundwater supplies, and protecting lakes and streams from pollutant runoff. Even a small increase or decrease in city parks can make a big difference for your city. In a city such as Atlanta, Georgia, a U.S. city renowned for a lack of green space, has been actively working to change this reputation. Most large cities have recently discovered that from environmental studies, now green in the atmosphere, which Omaha stated years ago, can be a large asset for the city communities. Money saved. In Atlanta alone, it was noted that trees remove 19 million pounds of pollutants each year, a service that would cost them approximately $45 million if they would have to pay for it themselves. Haven't we had enough trips to the doctors and medical facilities because of allergies, not to mention how it can help people deal with mental health? Direct exposure to nature has a positive effect for helping people deal with stress instead of it creates a happiness. You might say, but it's a small green space we are taking away. But is it? We moved to this wonderful neighborhood because it reminded me of my childhood neighborhood in New Hampshire. The beautiful mature trees which bring singing birds, blossoms, and beautiful fall foliage, not to mention shade to this community. Please stop and consider your own family's health before making this decision. Not only is it good for your health, the increase in vehicle traffic study is already dangerous at 90th and Center intersection would be overwhelming and ultimately cause more motor vehicle accidents. Let me start getting on the green wagon like most other major cities in America are doing at this time. I know they said they've done a previous traffic study. They forgot to take into effect the new 500 cars that will be attached to that one stoplight on 90th and Arbor. Also, the lady here brought up a minute ago about Arbor Street Junior High. The junior high comes out on 90th, and that's the only exit out of that junior high. So you had 500 cars coming out that, which is the only stoplight, to this excess area, this new development they want to have, because going out 90th or to Pacific, there is no stoplight, and the only one they have is on 90th and Arbor. So I think it is an unsafe condition to put kids in harm's way because there is no sidewalks actually in our neighborhood, and it would be a big thing to keep it a green space and all the safety of our children be more important than a few dollars for revenue for the taxes in Omaha. Thank you for giving me time for this.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard?
My name is Evan Halpane, and I live at 1306 South 94th Street. And I want to put these words into public record so everyone knows today what I have said. Most of my life, I did not pay attention to politics or get involved in the community besides with my career. The last national and state election were the first times I ever voted, and I'm 29 years old. I realized that I could not be a bystander as I watched that ideals of this country were ignored or blatantly torn apart. This proposed Arbor Woods development gives me this call to action of not standing back and being ignored. Omaha citizens, those of the West Side area, and specifically Sunset Hills, are being ignored by the people in power. Most of them were voted, you guys, in respect to us. I'm not going to take up extra time reiterating what all my neighbors have said about the specific facts. Instead, I want to look at the actions of NP Dodge and the city council and city employees and what it represents in terms of being human beings and citizens of Omaha and this country. I work in education. A huge part of my job is teaching social skills to students, either in the classroom or in my office. We start out with empathy and compassion, feeling or understanding how another feels, and doing something to show you care about those feelings. Empathy and compassion have been missed in this process. Several times in different types of communication to NP Dodge, this city council, and the mayor, the people who live in the area have expressed their worry, concern, and frustration. But there has been no empathy and certainly no compassion towards that worry. NP Dodge has stuck to their original plan, wanting to develop the whole golf course. Well, they showed, anyways, I wrote this passionately, but they showed how there was a part of it that was left. Thank you. Please show compassion and be willing to compromise with the people who live with the effects of this development. And in regards to compromise, another social skill we teach is problem solving. We have a problem where a company who owns the land wants to develop it in a specific way, but those who live around the land want to have it developed differently. A few solutions have been proposed where each side would get something they want. NP Dodge and the City Council have ignored the Sunset Hills neighborhood side and only listened to the side that would get the city more tax dollars. What is even more disrespectful than what I just stated is the fact that NP Dodge, this City Council, and the mayor have heard what the consequences are to this proposed development and, as is, have done nothing to change it. Developing on this land through flooding would put the Sunset Hills neighborhood and surrounding communities in danger, and I had seen something where if this flood were to be really detrimental, it would displace about 13,000 people and at least cause $1 billion in property damage. And I believe that statistic was made without even the development they're proposing. So you have heard the consequences of traffic as it proposed now. A huge increase will put people and children in danger in a neighborhood without sidewalks. Now I know for a fact that this is not something you would want in your neighborhood, so why burden us with that? I know you, no matter how nicely you build an apartment complex too as well, and it looks like the plan's not too bad, you always have to deal with people who are willing to steal things out of cars and break into other people's apartments. I am all for housing for all, but I just want that to be in consideration when putting this apartment complex in, and especially the area, given the fact that I feel like I think there are 4 or 5 different apartment complexes that surround our area. I do not think that it is worth the city and NP Dodge to make money to detriment of our neighborhood. Our neighborhood has an occasional crime, but I know it would increase if this development was all in the name of city taxes and NP Dodge. Again, I hope you can have some empathy to how that would feel if that happened to your neighborhood. There were other consequences mentioned before that I feel are not great, but not detrimental. However, one consequence I must touch on as an educator is what this development will do to Sunset Hills. West Side District lines were moved to accommodate this bigger, newer school, what there was at the time. Now this new development will put 37 lots and 210 apartments on that land. Now I know, and I'm not trying to be political here, but for some reason in this country right now, political education is not a priority. They're taking funds away from it. But I can guarantee you, you will not like the effects of larger class size that you are putting onto this school in regards to people. It will decrease graduation rates, and it sadly will produce people who have nowhere to turn but homelessness and sometimes crime. For those of you who send your children to public school, and I don't know which one of you do or don't, would you want your child's education damaged due to this fact of wanting to make extra city tax dollars when I know for a fact this city is developing like crazy, so I know you would get it somewhere else? For those of to me, the best solution, based on the consequences of what this development would do, would be for NP Dodge to sell to the anonymous donor for a green space / park, maybe take out the apartments so it's not like less of an eyesore and there'd be less people to overload the neighborhood, the traffic, and the school, or maybe just develop only a fraction of the property with just single-family homes. When I use the social skills and strategies I teach my students, I realize as of this moment, this Arbor Woods development would be bad for the Sunset Hills neighborhood and community. I know that either the plan for development must change or be sold for a green space or park. One of the last lessons I teach is taking responsibilities for your actions, and I think it applies here. This city council has voted for this development in the past, and I hope today all you see it was maybe not the greatest decision. But right now you have a chance to take responsibility for your actions by not voting for this proposed development. We all make mistakes, and we all can do our best to make up for our mistakes. And this city council has a perfect opportunity to do this. NP Dodge, after hearing the concerns and facts about their proposed development on this property, how can they not have empathy, respect, and responsibility to change the plan if this council, with lack of good responsibility, might vote for it? So I have one big final picture to create here before I step down. You can vote on the side of the people, a principle and cornerstone on which this great country and city was founded, or you can vote on the side of the developer, and by doing this send a message that numerous people's voices do not matter. Facts of potential danger to people do not matter. And all votes in this country, city to federal government, are bought by those with money to benefit them, despite risk of life and well-being to others. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Any other opponents who wish to be heard?
That's a hard act to follow. I'm Louise Geiger. I live at 1636 South 99th Street. My husband Don has already spoken for the neighborhood. I'm speaking for myself and another neighbor who could not be here today, Doug Fair, who lives at 9828 Pine Street. My message is floodplain, floodplain, floodplain. And I realize the NRD has passed on this. Everybody passes on this. We're in the floodplain. We pay flood insurance every year. It's more than our homeowners. To sell our house, so I realized that he said that there would be no new homes in the floodplain. That's good, because the ones that are there, if you try and sell your house to someone who has a mortgage, you have to have flood insurance for 15 or 30 years. We still pay. We don't have a mortgage. We still pay it to protect our investment. So I don't care what the NRD says. On March 13th, when we had the 1 inch of rain on the snow, the Papio came within 1 foot of the top. Logs, everything coming down. When we look through, there are all kinds of neighbors that we have that don't have flood insurance, either can't afford it or they expect you to protect their property by not voting for a building in the floodplain. This is the statement I would like to read. This spring, we witnessed firsthand the powerful destructive power of flooding water that took lives and could result in 1 billion of losses. Currently, NFIP, the flood insurance program run by FEMA, has borrowed from the U.S. government and its tax-paying citizens over $36 billion. The GAO says in their 2019 report, without reforms, the financial condition of NFIP could continue to worsen. You're going to vote today on a development plan that could put more Nebraskans in harm's way. No matter what the NRD says, when floods don't say, okay, we're just going to go 1 foot above the floodplain. If we'd had 5 inches of rain in March, our house would be underwater. Before considering a proposal to build 210 apartments and 37 houses in a floodplain on the prior Sunset Hills Golf Course called Arbor Woods, you should rethink. Just like Offutt and other submerged properties in Nebraska, the developers devised man-made plans to protect these homeowners and renters from rising water. Flood insurance premiums, dirt infill, and by the way, those are lovely pictures of apartments. How tall is the infill? How much dirt has to be in there? That fills in the floodplain. I don't care whether it's 25% or 49%. It fills in the floodplain. Levees do less to protect our homes from rising water than Nebraska common sense to not build in a floodplain. While the NRD is trying to create reservoirs and secure land to hold back the the water this infill development will subtract from the naturally occurring floodplain in this part of Omaha. It will push the water, when it comes, to nearby neighbors who aren't as fortunate to raise the elevation of their homes. If allowed, the Omaha City Council and its planners should be held responsible when a natural disaster causes property damage and lives are lost in this area as a result of their action. I urge you to reconsider. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard? Opponents who wish to be heard?
Larry Store, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska. I'll voluntarily walk out, but I have to comment. This young gentleman that testified just before her that's a teacher. I've not been any more off topic or any less verbal than he has been. I've never been given 5 minutes, let alone 10 almost.
Larry, we're talking about
I've always been interrupted
Larry,
just
we're
like
talking
this.
about Larry, we're talking
And
about
I enjoyed
items.
your faces
We're talking
as
about
he was
items
reading
14
you the
through
riot
19.
act like I do,
We're talking
and I
about,
always get interrupted, and I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
Doesn't matter, just find a door, please. Thank you. Thank you all. I knew that already. If there's no, are there any other opponents who wish to be heard?
I'll keep this brief because I don't have a prepared statement. My name is Jim Griss. I live at 1526 South 93rd Street, been at that residence for 30 years plus. We know 93rd Street. We know the traffic that goes by there day in and day out, and we already know the speed that people travel and the volume that goes down that pathway, that street. And when you look at the development, I think you have to look at how many people have risen at this moment to express opposition to it. And it's not like we're just the only ones here. There's a petition that we've all signed, probably over 1,500 people so far, that have expressed concern about this. And in general, if the developer would have came to us and said, we're going to put like-minded property, like-minded buildings adjacent to your existing property. We're going to do the standard size lots that we have. We're going to make it single family. We're going to make it blend in. Then it's part of our neighborhood. We embrace it. That's not a problem as long as you develop it safely on the constraints that are already in place for building on that space, because it is prone to being wet, and wet in a big way, and it's going to get wetter, I think, from my own opinion, as far as the way the amounts of massive rainfall that we've seen, the incidences of rainfall that's over 5 inches at a time. You can look at our drive back from Dallas last week when we hit 9 inches of rain north of Dallas. That's unusual, and it will continue to be unusual. So from my perspective, if this development was presented as an extension of our neighborhood, we would probably embrace it. But it's presented in such a convoluted, money grab manner that you're going to squeeze every square inch of property that you can and get all the concessions that you might from the city and make it what I consider to be a tumor on our neighborhood with limited egress, then it needs to be excluded as a tumor. It needs to be sectioned off from Sunset Hills and not be a part of our neighborhood. Because right now, as it's being proposed, it's not. It's something aberrant to what we're used to seeing. I'm speaking for my wife, Robin, myself, our 3 sons who were raised in that neighborhood. It's a great place. It's been a great place, and we'd like to see it be maintained as a great neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. With that, do the proponents wish any rebuttal time?
Try to be somewhat brief. You've heard a lot of our response to these comments before in the preliminary plat and preliminary matters, but I think some things ought to be touched upon. First is transparency. NPDOT's company, before they submitted any applications for the redevelopment of this area, met with neighbors. They met in small groups, they met in larger groups. Their plan adjusted from time to time. They met after the plans were submitted in small groups and larger groups, or just before they were submitted. They met with the City of Omaha, they met with the NRD. They have been as transparent as possible. At the same time, they are developing plans that they don't put out every moment, every time they change, every time that a new idea comes up. I don't think that's a consideration of lack of transparency. That's a consideration of taking a plan and trying to develop it. We have been told by the city planning department that they've never seen, or never is probably too strong a word, that it's unusual the number of times we've met with the neighbors. In fact, a neighbor called and wanted to meet with Mr. Dodge last week. That meeting was taken, and they discussed that. They need to understand that we had a contract. You've heard before that this was put open to a number of people who could redevelop the property. We were the ones that were chosen, I think in part because of the sensitivity of the developer in this kind of context. But we've had a contract on the property. Indeed, in part of the times when they've talked about other alternatives and other people who might come in and develop this for open space, or buy this for open space, we were either the contract holder or the owner of the property already. We have entertained and put forth conversation with respect to somebody else coming in. They had to pay certain amounts so that they could be made whole. They had to agree that if it's developed in the future, that we're not going to bring in a new developer and just exit. It would be the NP Dodge Company. We're ready to listen to those kind of offers or comments, but nothing has transpired that's been acceptable to date. So we've worked with them. With regard to sidewalks, working with the neighborhood, we looked into, and we've contacted the city, and we've talked to them about how can they get sidewalks in their neighborhood if they want to put them in. There is a methodology for doing that. We would certainly support it, but apparently nobody wants to do it. And so that's up to them. It's not up to us to be able to do that. We don't own any of those properties. We are putting sidewalks in our properties. We think that that's going to make that, in fact, we're putting a street that will provide access out to 90th and Arbor, which has a signal at it already, and that may become the outlet of choice to a lot of the people, especially people who take other routes in through the neighborhood circuitously to get to their house in the 91st, 92nd Street area. We have also looked at speed bumps, speed tables, talked about those things. None of them have shown to be warranted to date according to the normal city warrant standards, but we've looked into those things. And we're prepared to discuss them under certain circumstances, but they're not called for. They're not called for by the traffic studies that we've undertaken. Now, we've undertaken traffic studies. We've undertaken studies with respect to the hydraulics for the floodplain fill and the development here. Those studies, and part of it is, it shows up in the plan. We've kept the plan squeezed up so that we have as little fill as possible, but those studies are, and they're not based upon our models, they're based upon models that you see all the time for traffic, models that were developed by the stakeholders at the City of Omaha and the NRD certainly, to determine what kind of hydraulic impact this is going to have. Hydraulic impact is where the water is going to be. And so those things, we have studies to support us. We're not up here saying, oh gosh, we're not going to have any impact. We're up here to say it's going to be minimal impact because the studies show that. And we're standing with those studies. Now, with respect to the PUD and the PUR, those are two elements of the same kind of overlay districts, which are, a PUD overlay district existed for decades before a PUR district came in. The PUR was for specific circumstances deeper into the center of town, in my view, because it takes away some of the minimum size restrictions and it puts in some design standards. We met the PUR that was submitted originally was analyzed, and there's a long list of analysis you go through under 585, 885, whatever the section number is, excuse me, I don't remember. But they go through all this criteria. The criteria for PUD and PUR is the same, except when it gets to design standards, or substantially the same, except for design standards. We went through the preliminary process, and the planning department wanted us to lay over the PUR so that we could have further discussions with the city with respect to designs. At those discussions, which were undertaken literally within days after that meeting, became clear that it wasn't necessary that we go ahead with the design standards. We had design standards already developed that we thought were consistent with the kind of development out in the Sunset Hills neighborhood.
Rick, let me get you to wrap up.
Okay, I will. So we don't think that there's any difference between those two. And it clearly is a redevelopment project. I think they're putting a PUD and a PUR and taking those titles of the project name further than the ordinance takes them. With respect to the master plan, that's why we reminded you early on that we've amended the master plan for the specific purpose of bringing it up to date. The golf course was closed. Anything that happens to properties as a respect to not being on the golf course had already happened. This is going to bring that property back to a productive use, and one that is worthwhile and is consistent with the master plan goals of having different types of housing in areas at all times. It's a new style of the master plan, but having multifamily housing connected with the single-family housing is something that is attractive to the city and not, as has been portrayed here, something that is a detriment. It is phased in, if you look at the design, from the single-family to the north, existing single-family and our single-family going down to the 90th and Center Street area. It is phased in so that the commercial down there has a stepping stone back into the residential. There are tremendous benefits to this project. It's consistent with the master plan. It has immediate tax benefit. There are no TIFs involved. It retains 60% of the current open space. It uses all of the city infrastructure that is already in place, so there's no problem with that. Biodiversity and age diversity of trees. We have a tree mitigation plan that you saw was submitted. That mitigation plan is always required. We are following it. We will replant trees. We are recycling trees to other developments to the extent we are able. No one other person will have to purchase flood insurance. There's no change to the maps. That's a FEMA map. FEMA would be the one to determine that, but there's no change, and there's no impact from the flooding based upon the analysis that we've done.
Okay.
It impacts us more than anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we close the public hearing. Ms. Melton.
Thank you. Mr. Fansaw, could you explain, because I'm still confused, the difference between the PUR and PUD and how it relates to this particular case?
Sure, yeah, Dave Fansaw, City Planning. A PUR and a PUD are both overlay tools that are used extensively in development projects in Omaha. The PUD has been around for a number of years. It allows for innovation in design, not only in structures, but site design, layout, landscaping, et cetera. The PUR is a relatively new tool that we have been using over the last handful of years, and much like the PUR, or PUD, excuse me, it's an overlay district that allows for innovation in design. A PUR comes with design standards, much like we see in our urban design code. It is mostly used in the developed parts of the city, but it is not excluded just to those areas.
So does it make any difference if initially I think I want a PUD and then I want a PUR or vice versa?
No, it doesn't make a difference. I failed to mention one advantage of using a PUR is we build in waivers that would normally have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, but through the PUR tool, because we require better building design, better materials, can require those. Sometimes we build in waivers that that don't have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
So because you have higher standards for the PUR?
Yeah, we built those in, again, because it talks, they were, the PUR is intended for infill development on those sites that can be constrained in the inner city.
Okay. And then for purposes of flooding concerns, what does the city look at, and who's in charge of looking at the flooding concerns? I know we heard that there's an NRD report. Did you review that?
So the city zoning code has a section about floodplain management. We have a floodplain manager on staff. He's a city planner who coordinates fill permits, requests that deal with floodplain, building in the floodplain, filling in the floodplain. City planners aren't engineers, so we rely on the NRD and their engineers to provide us feedback on those applications.
And so did you receive anything concerning, or what did you do to follow up to ensure that this development wouldn't affect any of the surrounding neighbors? I mean, my concern would be that it would affect the surrounding neighbors or cause surrounding neighbors to potentially have to purchase insurance that they weren't required to purchase before. Or will the building of these buildings potentially cause runoff that would create flooding for people that never had it before?
No. This proposal does not require any other existing homes in the area, would not require them to obtain flood insurance, and through our review of the application, again, along with the NRD's help, and you've heard that the developers hired their own engineers, there appears to be no negative effect of the fill in the floodway in this area.
So is it safe to say, because I'm just trying to figure out, I've gotten so many different emails saying so many different things. Is it safe to say that the only people that would potentially get flooded would be the new single-family dwellings? Or do you?
I don't know if I'd say flooded. I'd say some would have to be required to have flood insurance.
Some of the new buildings would have to have flood insurance?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now for law. There was a question brought up that there was a district court case that's been filed. Is that correct?
Alan Thielen with the Law Department. I have general familiarity with the case. I think there was a zoning board waiver granted, and then someone appealed that to district court. I don't know where that hasn't been resolved yet. As far as I know, there's no order from the judge preventing the city council here from taking action on these matters.
So nobody filed for an injunction or TRO or anything like that?
No, not that I know of.
Okay, so our vote today wouldn't have any impact on that case?
No, it shouldn't legally, no.
Okay.
It's two different analysis. I mean, the district court is going to look at whether there was a practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship that was proved in front of the zoning board, and the issues here are different.
Okay. And so, let's say the district court said it was, that it would just be sent back, like remanded to the zoning board to rehear? Or I'm not sure how that works.
That could be one result, yes. The district court could remand it back to the zoning board for another hearing.
And if they didn't get the waivers the second time, it still wouldn't have, they would just have to go back and change their plans? Would it have to then come back to us again?
They might have to go back to the drawing board and see what could be done without the waivers that were thrown out, yes.
Okay. So there wouldn't be any problem in us voting for this. That's their own separate case. They would just have to deal with whatever ruling.
Yes, you can proceed with this now.
Okay. And there was one mention, I just want to make sure that, there was one mention that somebody thought there should be a supermajority vote. Do you have an opinion on that?
There is a state law that provides that people can file protests against rezonings. And there's two requirements. One requirement is that the protests add up to 20% of adjacent properties or different formulations of that. And the protests met that, but the problem was with the other requirement. The other requirement says that the supermajority could only be triggered if the proposal is not in accordance with the master plan. In this case, the planning department and the planning board have both spoken on that and said that this proposal is in accordance with the master plan. So there isn't any supermajority voting that's triggered here under the state law.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I mean, because I really struggle with this. I understand when there's neighbors, and I've had, you know, my neighbors in my own district who, actually, they were fine with the apartments, but they didn't want to be connected with a road, and the master plan calls for connections. I mean, I think we've all been there with development and, you know, balancing it out. And I do think it always seems that way before it happens. And I think Councilman Thompson, or Dr. Thompson, oh, sorry, he's not here, but I think he'll remember the Sterling Ridge very, very well, where it's very similar, a golf course was replaced. And I have to tell you, I know one of the neighbors there and was over at her house just last year, and there were other neighbors there who still to this day say they you know, appreciated getting to know Dr. Thompson, but said, you know what, this Sterling Ridge is absolutely wonderful. And they go, and these are people who lost the golf course off the back of their house. But the developer has done a wonderful job in what they're doing, and they really enjoy going to the places that are there now. And they're building not just places to live, there's retail and office space and everything else. So I just want to say that this is, I know that it's hard, and you think that everything is going to change, but what I like about this project is it's not just a bunch of apartments thrown in there. It's got a layer of the single family houses, and it's my understanding a list of people. And so that single family housing is that barrier to having apartments drop there. And I think this is the type of development I would like to see with future apartments in our master plan, is let's make sure we do kind of layer it in as opposed to just stick the apartments right on the outside. So this is kind of what I like to see in the future. We have 38 single family homes that can be added into the West Side School District. And I think that's important. So I get the struggle. I really do, my own neighborhood as well, but we also support, kind of have to balance that development. And I think this one probably makes more sense than throwing in 600 apartments, which I think on this space, there could probably be a lot more going in and a lot higher density. That's what I don't want to see for this area. I want to see it kept at this low density amount, and I think that'll fit into the neighborhood. But I get it. I struggle when you have a whole neighborhood, and you know, that comes down and takes the time and you listen, and so you just kind of got to go with, I guess, what you think is going to be the best thing for Omaha in the long run and the greater Omaha. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'll apologize in advance. I'm going to ask a number of questions that have already been answered, but these are issues that I've heard from many of the neighbors, and I want to make sure that we address those, and they, you know, that they understand that we are listening. So I think I'll start out with, because I think really there are 3 or maybe 4 issues that are raised as major concerns by the neighbor, including in the process, which I think Councilman Melton has asked Mr. Thielen and gotten responses on those, but the others were public safety, flooding, and density. And density, I think there was some, earlier on, Mr. Onken also expressed some concerns with continuity of the neighborhood. So I think I'm going to start with asking by Mr. McMeekin to come down and address some of the flooding issues.
And I've said all along, both to the neighbors as well as the developer, that, and here's one of those questions that's already been asked, but I've said from the outset that if there's one property owner that's required to have flood insurance as a result of this development, that there's no way I could ever support something like that. So if you could just kind of reiterate or give us that information that we can be sure that that's what the NRD and your engineering has addressed.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Harding. No, and as Mr. Fanslaw stated, no additional properties would be placed in the floodplain or required to purchase flood insurance because of this project.
Okay. So the other issue or concern I would have too, especially if I lived in the neighborhood, is with the fill coming in, the proposed fill coming in to reclaim some of the floodplain or the flood fringe area.
Right.
What are the floor elevations of that in relation to the surrounding neighborhood?
As it exists now, without the development, the homes in the surrounding neighborhood sit significantly above the golf course. It ranges from a few feet to more than 10 feet. The average fill depth to bring our site out of the floodplain is about 4 feet. There's some deeper areas, some shallower areas. When we're done, the homes in the existing neighborhood will remain above the filled area. There's a couple lots in the area of 91st and DuPont where the existing homes will be generally equal in elevation to the new homes. And in that area, there's a swale that will drain, that flows in between the existing and the new. So generally, the new lots remain below the existing neighborhood. One thing, a couple things have been going through my head with respect to the flooding too, and to think about this particular site. 3 points with respect to the floodplain. The floodplain of the Big Papio is wide and it extends for many miles. And even though in isolation this seems like a lot of fill, when you look at the entire width and breadth of the floodplain, it's not. The second point with respect to floodplains is that in a flood, the majority of the flow occurs in the center of the floodplain, where the channel is. The water is deeper there, it moves faster because there's less resistance. When you get on the edge of the floodplain, there is more resistance to flow, the water is less deep, and there is much less impact from fill on the edges than there would be from fill in the center. That's pretty obvious. And the third factor with respect to this site is we're immediately upstream of the West Center Road Bridge. Bridges tend to restrict the flow of floods and cause the water to reach a higher elevation than there would be without the bridge. So the bridge ends up diminishing the small impact of the fill we're putting in. So all of those factors are the reasons why the impact is not significant due to the flooding, the fill that is being put in for the development.
So, and I've received some pictures during certain rain events, and it shows kind of, if I remember, one particular picture showed water flowing kind of in between maybe some of the single-family homes and the clubhouse, and just coming down through there. So I would assume in the engineering of the site that things like that will be taken into account or re-engineered so that those areas, that those current conditions do not exist going forward.
Let me walk through 3 points related to the local drainage.
Okay.
First, on the far west side is a fairly large ditch that runs along the east side of the school property. That drains a big portion of the neighborhood. That will not be touched. we're not even impacting that ditch at all. In the center of the development is a smaller ditch that flows out of the neighborhood, and that swale will be collected in a storm sewer, designed in accordance with the city standards, and carry the flow toward the creek. Then, as I mentioned earlier, there's a smaller swale in the area of 91st and DuPont that will remain in existence between the existing neighborhood and our new lots, will flow behind the new lots, be captured again in a storm sewer. All of the storm sewers that we're building will flow into one of 3 stormwater detention cells, again designed in accordance with the city standards, that mitigates any increase in runoff just from our development.
Okay, and so another question I got from one of the neighbors was in relation to water quality and as it relates to runoff and how that's addressed or treated. So could you tell us how that would be accommodated?
And that's another function of the 3 stormwater detention cells. They serve a dual purpose, which is what the city ordinances require. They serve a water quality purpose as well as a stormwater detention purpose. So the greatest amount of pollution from urban runoff occurs in what's called the first flush, the first part of the rainstorm. All of the cells will capture that, and any pollutants are captured in the cells, which helps with the water quality issues.
Okay. All right, thank you. I think you've addressed those issues that I had as it relates to that. I'm going back to one of Henry's emails, so I make sure I kind of stay on track here. So well, actually, you can probably address some of the public safety issues too as it relates to traffic. And walk me back through what impact the traffic associated with the new development may have on the surrounding area.
Well, the first thing we do is project the traffic that will be generated by the development, the new development. And by the way, throughout the presentations, we've talked about 210 apartment units. Actually, the first phase will only be 140 units. The others may come in the future. But the traffic study is based on the 210. So we project the traffic that will be generated. Then we count the traffic on the surrounding streets, both 90th Street and the neighborhood streets. And we distribute the new traffic based on the patterns that are existing already. So, and it happens in any development that I've been experienced in over the years. The majority of the traffic seeks to get to the arterials by the shortest possible route. They want to get to a signal where they know they can get out. So the majority of the traffic goes to 90th and Arbor. There is a small amount of the traffic that will use the neighborhood streets to get to the school or for whatever reason they have. The increases on the neighborhood streets are not to the point where they will cause any capacity problems. The streets can easily handle it. For instance, in the afternoon peak hour, which is the worst case, our study showed that there'd be about 1 additional car every 2 minutes at 93rd and DuPont. The speed issue, Mr. Anderson talked on that a little bit. The city has processes to look at the need for speed bumps and other speed controls, but as I understand those processes, you have to have the development in place and then do studies on what's actually occurring in terms of the speed of the traffic. So that would be something that typically would come later. Certainly it would be better if the neighborhood had sidewalks I live in a neighborhood just about a mile to the southwest. We don't have sidewalks, and it would be much better if the neighborhood had sidewalks. Just a fact.
So I'll ask a little bit about some of those safety or traffic issues when I've got a few questions for Mr. Dodge too. But
Okay.
I think that's about it for those, and I
Okay.
appreciate your answer. So, and then Mr. Onken talked early on through the preliminary plat stage about the continuity of the neighborhood. So I might ask Stan Howe Jr., who I think is the architect for this. Is that correct? Can you talk a little bit about the existing homes and whether or not this is compatible, or it's how the architecture of this proposed new development is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood?
Sure. Stan Howe with Stan Howe Architects. So the existing homes are 1950s and 60s ranches, raised ranches, split levels and two-story. They do have a 35-foot height restriction to all the lots around there currently. The proposed multifamily will have a 35-foot height. The houses all have pitched roofs. We will have pitched roofs. They are some brick in most cases, a few all brick homes there. With lap siding, we will have lap siding. I'll agree, the massing, obviously, for apartments is greater than for a single-family home, but materially, they're the same. We've done what we can to take elements of the single-family homes and put them in something that's obviously quite a bit larger than a single-family home.
Okay. And when you talk about 35-foot heights, that's not to the top of the roof, is it?
No, the way the city calculates height is to 1/2 of, if it's a pitched roof, gabled or a hip roof, to 1/2 of the length of that hip on the roof. So it does not reach the peak, correct?
Okay. But there are other homes in the neighborhood that are similar to that, or?
I doubt there are any that are 35 feet in height.
All right. Thank you.
Many are ranches and raised ranches and split levels.
Okay, thank you. One of the reasons I asked Mr. Howe to do that, my wife's an architect, and if I try to talk about compatibility of architectural styles, I will be sleeping outside, so. I think, there was, well, I can ask, Mr. Dodge, Nate, I have some questions for you too, if you wouldn't mind. I was gonna ask this of Mr. McMeekin, but I forgot, but I think he could address it as well too, because when we were talking about roads, another issue I've heard a lot about from the neighbors is access to the trails or access to Toll Park and things of that nature. I know there's a bridge that goes across the creek, but could you kind of address how or if there's going to be access to the Keystone Trails? I think that's Keystone at that point.
Yes, Nate Dodge, NP Dodge Company. Right now, we're in talks with the NRD. It is their desire to have, to create within the development the ability to get to the Big Papio Trail. I actually live in the neighborhood, and so when my son and I go on the bike trail, going across Center Street, going across that bridge, and then coming back to it is, I'd say, one of the more dangerous parts of that particular trail. So what we're doing is we're trying to work with the NRD to make it so that there's a connection there and one wouldn't have to go across Center Street. We haven't gone past just the discussion stages. There's a bike path manager in the NRD, and so they've reached out to us and said they have a desire to do it. We said that we'd like to too, but we haven't been able to figure out the design of it yet. There will be access to Sunset School, so there will be a path to Sunset School from the development, and I actually believe it will allow those in the neighborhood to stay on sidewalks and to get to the school. So I believe by going through the development, I believe that'll benefit the neighborhood. And obviously, any of those would be available to anyone along the trail or on the trail to use it and have access to it once we've figured out that access. There's on the south side, there's an issue with the height of how one would get underneath that bridge. That's one thing we have to get through. And I believe over by the bridge, there is a way to get to build directly there. And we're working with the NRD to do that.
Okay. And now in no particular order, so another neighbor wanted to know about the trees that would be taken down. I think one of maybe it was Mr. Anderson referenced a tree mitigation plan, or how that there are trees that are right up against the trail. Do those stay?
Yep. So only in the in the area where there's going to be dirt work will trees be removed. Right now, there are 317 trees on the site. 127 of them are slated to be removed. A quarter of them are, about 30 of them are ash, and there are a significant number of silver maples and Siberian elms. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the smaller trees and actually move them to those buffer zones. And Rick spoke to it a little bit, but having age and biodiversity of trees both in the buffer zone between the neighborhood and the single-family homes, and then also there's ample area in that 60% green space on the west side. That would be a place where we could also move trees if possible. Even if we move trees, we still have to replace them with new, but our goal is to as many trees as we can is to save. Okay. And in addition to that, there's another developer who is doing the Exarban development and the Hartward development, and he and I are in, he has, some of these trees are old and huge, and so the tree spades that are here in Omaha can't handle those, but he has a person from outside the state who he thinks can handle those trees, and I would give him access to those.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about density then too, which is another issue that was of the neighbors' concern and still is. And I think I heard Mr. McMeekin say that you're not building all 210 apartments initially, is that correct?
Yeah, initially it's going to be in 2 phases. So we would be, roughly a third of them aren't going to be built initially. So 2 of the 5 buildings would not be built. And so I think that's 140. So if you take the 140 and the 37, it's 177 units initially. That could get to 210. And I wouldn't see that, Councilman, getting completed within 5 years. So we'd get the first phase done and then possibly add the second.
Okay. And I know you and I had a conversation about, and it resulted as another question from one of the neighbors about access to the site off of Arbor during construction.
Right.
So there was, and I've talked with Jeff Rieselman from our Public Works Department. Want to make sure that if this project were to go forward, that the impact on the neighborhood as it relates to during construction and, you know, also with some of the grading work and fill work that would be done. Yeah. Obviously, there's going to be truck traffic. So want to make sure that after I talked with Mr. Rieselman, and then I reached out to you to say, you know, if this does go forward, how are we going to make sure that that impact is as little as it can be on the neighborhood, and even to the point of maybe talking to the ownership of the northwest corner of 90th and Center, which is the Schlossberg family, and seeing about maybe having a haul road across that property so that you don't even have to utilize Arbor Street at 90th.
Yep. So, Councilman, you brought to us the concern in the neighborhood. They sure as heck didn't want the dirt trucks coming up 93rd and going through the neighborhood, which made a lot of sense. And so we've talked to the contractor through Mike McMeekin's group to see if they could utilize 90th and Center and Arbor Street. And and since your conversation, I reached out to the Schlossberg companies. We have talked They would be open to a haul road that would go through their space. The one drawback to that is that there's mud that goes on the tires of the trucks, and so that they call it a runoff. And maybe Mike could speak to this a little better than I could. However, that would then go on to Center Street or 90th, and the dirt movers were considering using the current parking lot as their part of their runoff for dirt. So we're still balancing that, but the conversations continue with the owner of 90th and Center, and if it can work out, we would love to use that as a...
You know, as I'm sitting here thinking, well, maybe a compromise even might be, maybe on the inbound traffic, if you will, they use the haul road. You use the parking lot as maybe that runoff area, and then you have lighter trucks going back across Arbor and maybe little...
Mike McMeekin, if I could just address that. So yeah, the first thing we've done is all of the contractors will be prohibited from coming through the neighborhood for construction access. They're being limited to Arbor Street. Now, we would look at the Schlossberg property. The one thing to keep in mind there, though, is we don't know where all the traffic is coming from. We do not want anybody making a left turn off 90th to come through the Schlossberg property. So if someone was coming from the north and needed to make a right turn to access the site, that would make sense. Any other direction, it's going to be problematic because of the traffic safety.
Okay, well, I want to make sure, I want to have the commitment on record that you will try to work that out with the Schlossbergs or whoever the ownership might be at the time.
We will continue to talk to them.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, we're actually trying to work it so that if we bring in dirt, we could also bring it in for their lot as well if they need it.
Okay.
But we'll see if we can get there.
So another concern is certainly traffic on 93rd Street.
Yep.
And I know we had some discussions about that as well as speed bumps, and I think there was a comment maybe from Mr. McMeekin that it didn't meet current warrants in order to suggest that they are needed. I think, though, that there's a similar situation, and I'm doing something, I'm not an attorney, which I'm proving because I'm going to ask a question I don't know the answer to of Public Works, but I think there's a similar situation where it's either 88th or 89th from Center Street going north into the west side parking lot, you have a very similar setup. There's actually a jog in the middle of that too.
Mm-hmm.
They recently installed 2 speed bumps along that run. So I guess this is my way of asking a question of Mr. Stubbe. Even if they are not warranted, Mr. Stubbe, if we could have a commitment from the developer that they would, at their expense, install a speed bump or 2 speed bumps, again, if warranted, or maybe if close to being warranted, how might we, I want to have that on the record, that commitment is there too.
Sure, we would participate in that.
So I'll ask Mr. Stubbe if, in your analysis or whoever analyzed the traffic study for the city, does it currently not meet those warrants?
Bob Stubbe, Public Works. So I'm going to provide my opinion, then I'll have Todd enter in here. But traditionally, our traffic calming program is set up based on actual conditions. So in this particular situation is that we wouldn't know if the traffic calming warrants are met because obviously the development hasn't occurred yet. So once the development occurs, traditionally what happens is we might get a resident to say, hey, would you take a look at some type of calming measure? And that's when essentially those warrants would be evaluated. And it's based on speed, and it's also based on volume of traffic.
Would you consider putting those in if it didn't meet warrants? Or let me ask you it a different way. Are there areas where you've done that in the past that didn't meet warrants, but you still put them in?
If they don't meet warrants, I can't think of any situation where we've installed traffic calming devices that don't meet warrants. That's part of the reason why that we have that that traffic calming program that was established a number of years ago is to essentially establish those types of conditions that would actually trigger putting in some type of a traffic calming. That doesn't prevent the developer from doing something within his own development.
Well, I think there's already a speed table, I think, that's been included in the plat. What's that?
Yeah, it's the neighbors that will need the help, not his own development.
Right, that's why, okay, so at least I have it on record that he will participate when and if those are needed. Apologize, I'm going through the notes then. So actually, let me, another question for you, Mr. Dodge. So this was a follow-up to you said you were going to do this in 2 phases, at least as it relates to the apartments. Are there future plans to reclaim any more of the flood fringe for further development?
No, sir.
Okay, I want to make sure I have that on the record too. Okay. I think that's it for right now. I might have some other questions later if others might, but I appreciate your indulgence in letting me take some time to ask questions that have already been answered. Important to have that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pauls.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Dodge. Mine will be basically relatively simple. You presented your plan in front of the planning board, and what was the vote on that?
I believe that was 5-0. 5-0.
So you had support.
Yes.
Because you're answering a lot of questions today, and I understand the rationale behind that. These questions should not be new to you. If you've been out talking to the people who are opposed. I mean, you've had meetings out in the neighborhood?
Yes, sir.
And were there similar questions to this?
Yes.
That we're asking today?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just curious, we're getting to this stage and they're still not, they feel uncomfortable with that. But you believe during the planning stage, you made everything very clear, and with the meeting with the people in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I do. And I think Rick spoke to it, but even before we created a design, we wanted to hear the concerns of the neighborhood. And the 4 concerns have been traffic, flooding, density, and so, and access through the neighborhood. There's actually a couple of places where one could go out and drive through. And if you look at there's 2 green space ways to go out, and rather than do that, there was a tomato garden and a tree house that was along one of them, and then there's also a stubbed out street, and that owner didn't want us to go out that way. So we talked to the city about that, and they felt that 2 ways out were better based on a lot of the feedback that we were getting from the neighborhood. So we've actually significantly changed some of the things that we've done based on interacting with the neighborhood. I believe the concerns are the apartments. I believe the concerns are that people would prefer that we don't put apartments in that area, and we've looked at it and we've decided that we would like to. It's certainly far fewer units than I think the city would allow. And I'd love to redirect a question as to how many possibly could go in that area, but I know we're far south of that number, and I hope that the other thing that we did was rather than put all apartments in, we created a buffer zone, then single-family housing, another buffer zone, and then the apartments. So we're trying to mitigate the negative as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
There are no more lights. Is there a motion?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hardy.
I'm sorry.
That's right.
I did
Mr. Hardy.
forget one thing. Thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about the potential buyer that's been mentioned too.
Yes.
I think you had indicated, or maybe your attorney indicated, that you had had some conversations with that person. I actually went a few months ago, tried to restart those conversations, but I think from what I've heard, both in talking with her attorney, and I think what I've heard today was that no agreement has been made.
That's correct.
Is there a possibility that that door stays open?
We will always listen.
Okay.
And as late, Rick mentioned, Hussein called me, actually sent me an email, and within hours, I had agreed to a meeting the next day. We sat down, and the key thing would be we would have to have all of our costs out. I've put out there, we'd have to have all of our costs out that we have. It would have to stay green space. And if it were ever to be developed, we would have to be the developer, and we'd have to be able to buy it back for what we sold it for. And that was the last buyer wanted to have the right to be able to develop it or sell it back to us at a higher price, and we wouldn't agree to those terms.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You bet.
I guess I'll just close again by, you can sit down, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think that the passion and the cohesiveness of the neighborhood is incredible. And I'll say that if this does pass and gets developed, I think the people who would be moving into the single-family homes or the apartments want exactly what's there today. And that's a cohesive, strong neighborhood that people live, work, play, socialize, and I think that's what makes this neighborhood great. That's what makes Omaha great, is that we have people wanting to live in those areas and sharing those experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no more lights. Is there a motion? Second. There are no more lights. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
14 through 19 are approved, 7-0.
Council members, it's been, I've been asked to bring up item 26 because we have police officers here that are going to have to leave fairly soon, or as soon as we get done with this. So if you don't mind, I'd like to bring up item 26. Madam Clerk, can you call up 26, please?
Item 26, a resolution that a hearing shall be held on May 21st, 2019 to determine if the Class C liquor license held by Rain Ultra Lounge located at 8919 North 30th Street should be canceled.
Public hearing agenda item number 26 is today. Proponents, please.
Mr. President, Mayor, members of the council, William Acosta Trejo, Assistant City Attorney. I'll generally lay out this process for you. This is a two-part process on a cancellation. Today is a resolution for you to consider if there is enough to warrant going forward with the cancellation of the Class C liquor license for Millionaire Minds doing business as Rain Ultra Lounge at 8919 North 30th Street. I will in a second turn it over to members of the Omaha Police Department who will discuss some of the issues that have been occurring at the Rain Ultra Lounge for your consideration. Again, today you are only voting if this resolution should move forward to next week where there will actually be a hearing on the cancellation. So today is not a vote on the cancellation. Just to mention, I spoke with Mr. James Overton, the owner of the Rain Ultra Lounge before, and normally in this process he doesn't get a chance to speak. However, he does make himself available to you should you have any questions for him, and he has also requested a 30-day layover in this. I see it as you have two options. One, you can not continue with the vote today after hearing the evidence and lay it over for 30 days, or you can continue the vote. If you continue the vote, you must schedule this for the next hearing, which would be next Tuesday, unless Mr. Overton would care to then request his 30-day extension, in which case we could then provide him with an extra 30 days. Either of those two options would remain available to you. And I will remain if you have any questions of me. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Captain Matuza of the Omaha Police Department.
Thank you. Any other proponents?
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Captain Mark Matuza with the Northeast Precinct. I've been the captain there for about a year and a half. Talk a little bit about the Rain Bar. Since the homicide at the Rain Bar in January of 2018, we've received numerous complaints from neighbors via 911 radio calls, emails from Florence neighborhood associations, members, the mayor's office, via Brandy Preston, a couple of the council members here today, our Business Watch personnel, and from our chief's office just recently. Some of the nature of the complaints in regards to, that have kind of escalated as time has gone on are the parking, not only on private property, but also on grass, illegal by sign, parking in closed property that we spend hours facilitating and getting that taken care of at Albertson's Glass, which is just to the south of the Rain Bar. Reckless driving, drug activity, open drinking, littering, trash, complaints of piles of puke left behind in Albertson's Glass. They share a parking lot together. Loud music, noise, and actual fight disturbances that we've rolled up on and had to break up. And I think it's 6 tavern reports that we have done over the past year and a half or so. So some of the resources, and I'll get to this quick, in response to the complaints and disturbances, things of that sort, we've assigned anywhere from 1 to 3 officers since January of 2018. So with that being said, every time before the bar starts kicking off, I'll keep it at that, maybe 10, 11 o'clock, we hung crime scene tape to keep the patrons out of certain parking lots, out of Albertson's Glass and out of the community center that's also just to the south, out of that parking lot. So we have to actually hang tape to keep the patrons out of there, facilitating. And our Business Watch, Angie Acton Camp, it's a unit that we have as a resource. She indicated to me and sent Mr. Acosta an email that she spent over 17 hours on this particular case alone, facilitating the parking. And if you're Albertson's Glass or your library, you're literally going to spend hours and hundreds of dollars, and you have to do an adjustment on your insurance to get closed property. And it's something that you don't want to do. Unfortunately, it's something that you have to do in order to keep your parking lot clean, to keep your parking lot from spilling over into your business area. So we've done 6 tavern reports since that particular time. We have some general stats. I'll go to specifics possibly next week. Another example that we had talked about was Angie Acton Camp, and she's done a tremendous job. We get so many complaints from the mayors. Brandy Preston, she contacts me at least once every 10 days for the past year and a half. I have plenty of emails, etc. In addition to not only keeping in contact with those that have complained in regards to the traffic, the parking, etc., I've also kept in contact with Mr. Overton to keep this as civil and rational as possible, and to figure out a solution that everyone can get along. I know Mr. Overton's got a business to run, but at the same time, there's people in that Florence area that want to live in peace and harmony. So that's about all I have. I have Sergeant Tony Finch that worked down that particular area up until March 2019, midnight shift, and I also have Officer Carl Hansen as well. So if you guys want to speak to him, I'll leave it open to Will.
If they want to make a presentation, otherwise I would call.
Otherwise, we could just wait till
Okay.
I think they've been here, William Acosta, Assistant City Attorney, I think they've been here long enough. And I think Captain Matuza pretty much summed it up. You do have a copy of the tavern reports and the 911 calls that have been previously provided by OPD for your consideration. And that was a map, just for your reference, for those of you that are not familiar with the area. And that should conclude our presentation today.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard?
James Overton, 3217 Ohio, proprietor and owner of Millionaire Minds Entertainment and the actual owner of Rain Lounge. I do a positive business. I try to do the best I can to make sure that my patrons are positive and I can provide a safe environment. I try to be a good neighbor. When I actually looked out to actually make an investment in Omaha, on top of the other many investments we've made in Omaha, I actually looked for this place for about 10 years. And the reason we looked for it because it was actually isolated in North Omaha. It has its own actual parking infrastructure. Yes, like I said, it's not adequate for the amount of actual people that we have currently, but it's no different than what goes on in Benson, Blackstone, or anywhere else inside of the city. Like I said, the people are allowed to actually park on the streets. They've been instructed numerous times, do not park at the library, do not park at Robinson's Glass. I've taken the initiative and working with Captain Matuza to actually go ahead and actually rope those areas off with at my own expense and my own time, based upon the direction of OPD to police the Omaha Public Library and police Albertson's Glass to make sure my people didn't park there. And I was also instructed that if my patrons park on the grass, that they would actually write me a tavern report for patrons parking on the grass on property that I do not own, which I feel is harassment and is not legal. Like I said, at this point, like I said, I'm doing the best that I can to make sure that we run a positive business. I brought in OPD, every line item that we've actually discussed, that we actually went ahead and brought in to address these issues. I even tried to acquire the property to the west of me through the state, but the city hadn't vacated it properly in order for me to acquire the property to go ahead and put an additional parking lot in for my patrons. So that was going to be a 6 to 8 month process. I actually went ahead and actually communicated that to Mr. Jerem and the other members of the actual commission in regards to this. At this point, like I said, we have not had any actual police quote-unquote calls to our facility. The only unfortunate incident that we did have back in January of last year was the actual incident with Mr. LaFleur. And that was it. We have not had any calls. Yes, they have actually been driving through and seeing things and different things like that, but we haven't had no police calls there at all. And the people that are complaining aren't even in the vicinity of my business. All they do is drive by. Even the letters that they've actually sent out and the emails they sent by, they drive by and say, I've got a crowd. And I feel like I've been targeted as a minority business, and it's sad. It's very sad. It is disheartening for me to sit there as a black-owned business in North Omaha and get targeted because we actually have a place to congregate. I can count on my hands and toes the number of actual minority-owned liquor licenses in this state. There's not very many of us. They have nowhere to go. They have nowhere to where they listen to the music and the environment that they like to actually go to. I provide that service, and I'm doing the best I can to actually go ahead and actually be a good neighbor. I own other businesses. I know what it's like to have a terrible neighbor that leaves trash, different things like that. I employ 30 people in that small building, 30. 30 women, children, wives, husbands, nieces, nephews, cousins, everybody, 30 of them. All depend on me to make the right decisions to make sure that the place is safe and the environment. I stand at the door on nights, and I pat people down myself. I check IDs, I check bags. I do everything I have to do to make sure that that environment is safe for everyone that comes there. So for them to sit up there and act like that I'm not going above and beyond is sickening. They don't even come talk to me. They have closed-door meetings with the neighborhood. It's about 4 or 5 of them that sit up and actually have this witch hunt going out for me right now. It's 4 or 5 of them. And they sit there on top of the hill, which is probably about, I don't know, maybe 2,000 yards away. Like I said, and even still, all the calls that you guys have gotten, the noise complaints that you actually get, the officers come down, they respond, and they pull up and they say, we don't hear anything, but we have to respond because we're called. So if anybody's wasting actually the officer's time, it's those actual same people that are calling because I don't know if they're upset that we're in their neighborhood, that they don't actually want to go ahead and actually see these minority businesses or these African Americans in their community. And I've had them tell me to my face, we don't want you here. We don't want you here at all. And it's sad that the city still goes this way, that it's so segregated that we can't still operate to whereas, like I said, that we could actually go ahead and make a living. It's very sad. Now, there was a line item list of things that actually needed to be covered. Some of the actual tavern reports, out of those 6 that I actually went ahead and actually read, because I was actually supplied with those also, are where one young lady said she got into an altercation at my facility, and she actually went to the hospital. My security, of course, broke it up because I paid $1,500 a week for security. $1,500 every week for security. So she actually got into an altercation, and she told the officer, she's like, I didn't call you guys over here. She was at the hospital. She's like, look, I got a scratch or something on me or a bruise, and I'm just looking to get checked out. I feel kind of sore. But they made it a point, since they overheard the conversation, and it's in the report. They made it a point, since they heard the conversation between her and the treating physician, that she got into an altercation at a bar, and they asked her, what bar? Well, I got an altercation at Ring. All of a sudden, there's a tavern report for that. It's in the report. It's there. So me personally, for you all to make it out that we're actually detracting from public safety, and my business is actually a nuisance, no, like I said, literally, what we're doing is actually doing what we haven't been able to do, is actually have a place what we call our own in North Omaha, to actually congregate, meet up, and have a good time. I'm willing to do whatever it takes at this point to actually get along with OPD. I brought in officers. I brought in additional security. I pay those officers $60 an hour, a minimum of 2, to come to my facility on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Those are our 3 busy nights. I worked with MUD to actually go ahead and actually try to curtail the parking situation. They got upset with me after we had a written agreement. I've got a copy of the written agreement in my paperwork that said we will allow you to lease this property from us for $500 a year. They rescinded that agreement based upon the phone calls from the constituents and the fact that they said that I actually plowed the snow off the top layer of the grass. So what they did is they went ahead and fenced off the rear area of my building, and now, like I said, my actual patrons can't park there, even though they're MUD customers, they're taxpaying citizens. And it's sad, like I said, that the African-American community just doesn't get together and band together and say something about how they're being treated. It's terrible. It's obvious, like I said, it's all swept under the rug like it's not there. It's right there in your face. They're not spitting in your face. They're not hanging you by nooses, but even still, it's there. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of, in order for me to actually run my business successfully, I'm going to do what I have to do to actually go ahead and make sure I see this thing through. I got my security together. I took care of the actual things that you guys asked me to take care of, our tax situation. I got that caught up. We went 8 months after Kyle LaFleur passed without any business. We went from doing phenomenal business to basically doing nothing on Fridays, Saturdays, throughout the course of the week. And the Caucasian clientele that I have that you saw in the video on the news last night are the ones that kept me in business. Like I said, I don't have a prejudice bone in my body. My whole family's diverse. From Hispanic to Asian to Caucasian, that's my family. But for me to sit up here and actually sit up and have to defend myself is crazy. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that this business is safe and these people get a place to go. I envision the investments that we're making in North Omaha and Florence for us to actually look like Benson, for us to actually have an immediate facility to actually go to within 5-10 minutes of our homes so we can get home safely. An entertainment district in Florence. That's what I envision. I've been trying to get together with the other property owners down there and say, hey, do you want to sell? We can do some things with this empty building that you got sitting here. Or we can make this look better. We can do a lot of different things. But even still, I don't think the city sees it that way. They see it as, like I said, especially these 4 or 5 people that are actually harassing my business right now. Like I said, they've done everything, but like I said, but called me derogatory names to my face. And you know where I'm going with this. It's very sad. So like I said, I appreciate your time and your consideration with this. Like I said, there's a lot. I worked for the city of Omaha for 17 years. 17 years. Check my background. 17 years. I worked with OPD. I work with Omaha Fire, Public Safety. Hell, I installed their cruiser cams and their Panasonic tough books. Like I said, so for me to sit up there and to see that I negate or I don't care about the city is sad. I work within the guidelines of what I have, and I do the best I can with what I'm providing. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. Can we carry this over for an additional 30 days if allowed, please? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carla Wesley, and it's 7502 North 73rd Circle. And I just came, I wanted to hear what was going on. I was watching Channel 7 News, and I saw him on there. And I've met him, I met him here, but I really don't know him. But when his bar first opened, I did go and visit. And we talked, and he told me all about his dreams and and what I had done is I had gone to one of the Italian restaurants, and I'd gotten food, and I said, well, can I bring my food in here and eat? And he said, sure. And I thought, well, this is good, because a lot of bars don't let you bring food in from the outside. And we actually sat there and we talked. He talked about his vision. We talked about just pretty much what he said. And I believed him, but like I said, I really don't know him. I've seen him in the county building before because I used to work in the clerk's office. But I'd been in there a couple times, and he's right, when Kyle was killed, it hurt my heart. And I still find it hard to go in there. I really do. And his business has dropped off because when I go home, I hit the interstate and I go that way. There's not a lot of people there. And I just don't think I know something has to be done about these shootings and all of this, but for him to be a business owner with the visions that he has, I think he's due that opportunity to try. But like I said, I haven't been able to take myself back in there, and I know his business did suffer. I know it did. But I think he deserves a chance. I think he's got good visions for North Omaha. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. So this is in my district, and I have received a lot of similar complaints from residents and surrounding businesses consistent with the discussion from the police department and Captain Matuza there. I think it has been a burden on police resources, and there have been disturbances, and there has been a parking situation there. I think everyone would agree with that. So I don't relish having to make a recommendation on this, but today is not an up or down. Today is, do we set a hearing for May 21st, which will be next week? And I do think a hearing is warranted at this point. So my motion would be to go ahead and approve that hearing.
Moved and seconded to set the hearing on item 26. Mr. Jerem.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. Being a member of the Law Committee, I think you could hear the 180-degree difference in the spectrum of the licensee's position versus the police department's position. And it's long been, as far as I've been on the Liquor Committee, we've had this case in, I think, twice that I can recall. And notwithstanding the feelings that Mr. Overton has, I can assure you it's been the position of the committee that he just needs to do some things to improve the operation, to eliminate the burden on the police resources, the burden on his neighbors, and to be a productive, successful businessman. And we've given him a list of things to do. And we've told him, you know, you may think that you're this target, you may think that you're this victim, but we have this hearing on today. We put down the road from when we last considered the case. We gave him a lot of time and some things to do so that hopefully we wouldn't need to come to a hearing. But we had to have, we felt, an end date to really force his hand to make some of the improvements we thought were critically necessary to abate these burdens, as I've talked about, on the police, on the neighbors, on the businesses. So it's my belief today that we should support this motion to set the hearing, but between now and next Tuesday, we obtain a report, an objective report from Mr. Acosta-Trejo after meeting with Mr. Overton as to what exactly concretely he has done to meet the conditions and the things that the committee has asked him to do. We've heard him say, I now have these extra police that he's paying $1,500 a week for. We've heard him say he's paid his taxes as an example of something that we wanted him to do. But we also know there were the things that the police wanted them to do, that we want them to do, and I think the only way to do that is for them to meet and then report back to us before we take this up next week, so we can have an objective basis to say, should we lay that over more time, or should we vote and hold this whole hearing next week? So that would be what I think, as a member of the committee, would be a thing to do. We keep the motion and the ball rolling towards disposition, but we have a report back on what exactly he's done, whether that meets the needs of we set forth as a committee. And the chairman's here. If I misspeak in anything, let me know.
Next week anyway.
But then we can report back to the council, and whether we, need to hear this next week, we can lay it over, but that's what I think we should do.
Thank you. Mr. Palermo?
Never mind.
Never mind? Okay. Mr. Harding?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to be clear. We're talking about next week, but I thought I heard Mr. Acosta-Trejo say something about 30 days.
Yeah, if we set this for hearing next week, we can consider next week, I think I heard him say, whether to lay it over for an additional time, that we would have time to do that, or we could do that and lay this over. I thought I heard you say we could do either.
William Acosta-Trejo, Assistant
Or
City
we could
Attorney.
vote it.
Yeah, I gave you two options based off Mr. Overton's request. Either one, you could not have the vote on, that you've just seconded, and instead lay this over for 30 days. Or if you decide to go forward and vote this up or down, assumedly up, and this has to be set within the next 10 calendar days. The only person then is Mr. Overton, who can ask for a continuance, which he's requesting 30 days. That would be his choice to delay the process.
So we could come back here next week for a meeting, and
If
the will of the body after getting this report is to lay the matter over to allow him additional time to do whatever remaining tasks or items he hasn't completed yet, then we could lay the vote over next week as well.
If Mr. Overton has requested that, yes.
Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Festerson?
Thanks, Mr. President. And I would just add that, by way of process, that yes, we could do that, but I would also add that if we establish this public hearing for next week, which I think we should, and I have motioned, we need to have that public hearing because there'll be folks that want to come to be heard on this issue. It doesn't mean we couldn't then lay over if that's the will of the body, but the hearing would need to take place, in my opinion, for the public, for reasons of the public participation.
Is there
And it's been the position of our law department, is if we advertise a public hearing, we always have the public hearing. But if we continue the matter, we would probably continue the public hearing too.
Okay. Is that, okay, and it's been moved and seconded to set the public hearing for next week? Okay. It's been motioned and seconded, no further lights, roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Items 20 and 21 can be considered together. Applications to consider Class CKG liquor licenses for Omaha Tap House Farnham, located at 1403 Farnham Street, Suite 136. Omaha Tap House Pepperwood, located at 579 North 155th Plaza.
Public hearing agenda items numbers 20 and 21 are today. Proponents, please.
Hi, Naomi Burke, 5021 North 129th Street, and I'm here representing Nourish Enterprises, doing businesses Omaha Tap House, both locations.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Festerson, are you still? You don't have any? Okay. Is there a motion? Moved and seconded to approve items 20 and 21. No further lights. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
20 and 21 are approved, 7-0. Item 22, an application to consider a Class I liquor license for September's, located at 11008 Prairie Brook Road.
Public hearing agenda item number 22 is today. Proponents, please.
Thanks, Mr. President and Council members. My name is Doug Crussell, 2305 South 113th Avenue. That's my wife,
wherever she is, September Crutzel, and we're the two owners and the sole owners of any percentage of September's upscale, trying to get her license.
Thank you. And you answer any questions that we might have,
Yes,
too.
sir.
I also want to thank you all for your patience today.
Oh, no
Are
problem.
there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just quick question. Is this within the Rockbrook property, or where's this located?
Yes, it's, yes, Rockbrook Village.
Okay, and which bay are you guys going into? Or
It's
what are
hard
you
to
next to?
describe. There's a dentist on one side and a hairstyle.
Okay.
Hair salon on the other.
Gallery.
Yes.
She's
Okay.
stepping out, we're stepping in.
All right, great.
Just
Good
a
luck.
few slots down from the corkscrew.
Okay, good luck.
Another place like that. Thank you.
It's a one-stop shop. You can get teeth, everything.
Get your haircut, come have
Moved and seconded to approve item 22. No further lights. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 22 is approved, 7-0.
Thank you.
Item 23, an application to consider a Class D liquor license for Maya Market located at 2910 K Street, Suite C.
Public hearing agenda item number 23 is today. Proponents, please.
Afternoon, council members. Juan Francisco Etienne Amaya.
Thank you. You're just here to answer any questions we might
Yes,
have, correct?
Mr. President.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve item 23. No lights. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
23 is approved, 7-0. Item 24, an application to consider a change of location for Medicine Man Pharmacy for their Class D liquor license to change from 715 North 132nd Street to 15615 Pacific Street, Suite 8.
Public hearing agenda item number 24 is today. Proponents, please.
Dan Billerback, president of BP Inc., DBA, Medicine Man Pharmacy. Requesting change of address or change of location for a liquor license. We are right now still at 715 North 132nd Street. We've been there since 1989, and over the years, the plaza has changed its parking, and my clients are getting older, so I have no front door parking anymore. So we want to move our pharmacy and the liquor license to 15615 Pacific Street, which will have front door parking plus drive-through options.
Okay. Thank you. Is that all you have? And you're here to answer any questions we might have, correct?
I don't think I have any questions.
Yeah, I don't,
You-
no,
you
you don't
have
have any questions with me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Ms. Melton.
I live down the street, and I'm going to miss you, but I'm sure Mr. Harding will welcome you into his district. And the parking, yep, I agree, so I hope you do better. That parking is awful right there, especially when you want to just run in and grab your stuff.
Especially wintertime, it's real bad.
But you're still not far, so I can still drive over to 156 in Pacific. All right, thank you.
Is there a motion? Moved and seconded to approve item 24. No lights. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
24 is approved, 7-0. Item 25, an application to consider a special designated license for Interlude Lounge located at 7643 Pacific Street for benefit for Valley Days flood relief on Saturday, June 8th, 2019, from noon to 2 a.m. with music until 2 a.m.
Public hearing agenda item number 25 is today. Proponents, please.
My name is Scott Petrowski, 431 South 119th Street.
Thank
Here to
you.
answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Jerem.
Yes, just a couple items.
Sure.
I take it you're going to have a big outdoor celebration to help
Yep.
raise this money. And that's a great cause. But
Sure.
one of the things that we typically get questions about or we hear about and concerns is if the outdoor music will be playing past midnight when you're close to neighborhoods.
Right.
And since you're so close to the apartments to the south, the residences to the west, most of the time we would request that the music end at midnight.
Okay.
So you could still serve till as late as you want, but the music would
So I
go
can
off.
still serve till 2?
Yes.
Okay.
You don't have any issue with that amendment?
No,
do
I
you?
don't. I understand.
Do I need to amend it? Motion to amend to approve, subject to music ending at midnight.
Second, roll call.
Melton.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Melton.
I'm sorry.
I just want to say, here, you sat here for 3 hours, and it's all to raise money for a good cause.
Right.
So when is it? It's on June?
It's on June 8th.
And you're doing a
We're doing a golf tournament at Elmwood during the day. And
Oh,
then-
you're doing the
yeah.
golf tournament in the day?
Right.
Okay.
And then the party starts at 6, so.
Well, I think that's
Should be
very
fun.
generous. Thank you for doing that and
Yeah,
and sitting
hopefully we
through
can
our
raise some
our
money.
meeting all day.
Yeah, thank you for your
Yeah,
patience.
for sure.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item 25, no further lights. Oh, there's
This is
amendment.
the amendment.
The amendment. It's been moved and seconded for the amendment. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion.
Second, roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thanks, guys.
And then item 27, there has been a request to postpone to the May 21st meeting.
Is there a motion? Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Consent agenda. Any member of the city council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the city council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed unless otherwise provided by the city council rules of order.
The public hearing on agenda items numbers 28 through 41 were held on May 7th, 2019. Is there a motion? Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
The public hearing on agenda items numbers 42 through 59 are today. If you wish to address the city council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by your name, address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or an opponent. Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
42 through 59 are approved.
Push, can I just say one thing?
Yes, I'm sorry.
All I wanted to do was thank the Parks Department for number 56, for the additions to Heflinger Park. Just wanted to thank them on the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 60, an ordinance to amend ordinance number 40992 for Street Improvement District number 6878, improving North 89th Circle from Burt Street North to the end of the cul-de-sac, to amend such district to become Road Maintenance District number 2019-04, to change the type of improvement to asphalt overlay. A is communication and support, B is communication opposition.
Public hearing, agenda item number 60 is, no, there is no public hearing, it's
public
just a vote today. Are there any questions? Mr. Festerson.
Thanks, Mr. President. So we talked about this item substantially last week. I would only add that I would support this conversion to an RMD, and I think we've now received a letter from the folks on that street that there's at least 6 out of 7 that do, which are about 96% of the linear footage. So I think they have come together as a street, and I would motion to support this, and before I move forward, I'll also just speak to 61 as long as I'm talking about this particular item. This has been a long road, as we talked about last time, to use a turn of phrase, I guess, for this neighborhood to fix this road. It's been at least 2 years since they've started this process, and that was prior to us having any kind of policy in place as it applied to RMDs, which is that this is now converting to. So I'd make the argument, and I think it's a substantive one, that they should be eligible for the 50% we have previously provided to RMDs. And I believe this is the last one that's a holdover from any kind of consideration prior to the policy we had in place. So I'd motion to approve 60, and I would do the same when we get to 61. Thank you.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve item 61. Mrs. Melton?
One question, because I wasn't here last week, Mr. Jocham, if you could. I just wanted to make sure that, and this is good, everybody, I mean, I guess the majority of the residents are pleased and happy with this result and want this moved.
Yes, Scott Jocham, 2120 South 72nd Street, proponent, and Timothy DeGeorge is my client. But last week we discussed the neighborhood trying to meet and get together, and they did have a meeting on Sunday night where they went, and I think they all did. Thankfully, the lawyers didn't show up at that meeting, and they actually accomplished something. They all signed a letter indicating that, as Mr. Festerson confirmed, that 96% of the linear footage is in support of this. And so that's a good sign, and hopefully you'll approve it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Then for the lights, it's been moved and seconded to approve item 61. Roll call.
60.
60, I'm sorry. Roll
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
60 is approved, 7-0. Item 61, a resolution to approve 50% cost share for road maintenance district number 2019-04.
Public hearing agenda, well, the public hearing has been had. Is there a motion?
No,
Oh,
there is a public hearing. Yeah, this one has a public
Oh,
hearing.
okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Public hearing agenda item number 61 is today. Proponents, please.
Thank you. Luis Jimenez, 518 North 40th Street. I just want to make a correction to Mr. Festerson's comment that there was no policy before the 50/50 cost share. There was policy, and that was 100% on the property owners. That was the policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to approve item 61. No lights. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 61 is approved, 7-0. Item 62, an ordinance levying a special tax and assessment on certain lots, parts of lots, and pieces of real estate to cover the cost of clearing snow and ice from sidewalks, group number 2018-01, is amendment of the whole requested by the Parks Department.
Second. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo.
Item 62.
Oh, this is 62.
62. Oh, you want to make a comment to that? Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry. If you had your light on, I didn't see it.
So,
It's not on. Okay. Now it's on. Go ahead.
but we're already voting, so I don't know if we can go back. I would like to make a motion to lay this over, at least I would like to lay it over for 1 week, just to give a little more time to get the total amount for all 3 that we're gonna have. That you had some last week for Board of Equalization. Am I on the wrong? No, I'm on the right one. Okay. And get the total cost, which I didn't have before today. So I would like a week to lay this over 1 week in order to get all of those costs. I've been working on putting together what I would like to do in the future, and I know Councilman Jerem that you said, fine, do something in the future, but I'm not gonna do anything today. I understand that, but I would like to see a plan that we have at least going up to law, and maybe give some relief to the people that got caught in this that I really, in my opinion, don't think we should have approved in the first place. Sometimes as an elected official, you gotta call a mistake a mistake. I don't think we should have approved this contract, even though it was the lowest bid. We should have rejected it and at least tried to go out one more time for another bid before we put this kind of burden on people who maybe made a mistake. And I always compare it to, jaywalking might be illegal, and everybody knows it's illegal, but I don't know that you should spend 6 months in jail for doing it. So, that's the reason I'm asking, at least for a 1 week layover. By then, I can at least have part of what the plan sent to law so that we can discuss it, and then discuss making a motion to provide some relief.
If you're going to do that, I think because there's a motion and second on the floor, I think you'd have to do a substitute motion. Is that correct, Mr.?
Is that what I need to do?
Alan Thielen, if everyone is agreeable, like we could have the movement and the seconder and whoever else voted to agree to Councilmember Melton's, agree to withdraw what they did and agree to Councilmember Melton's motion.
Absent that, though, wouldn't it have to be a substitute motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Because there's still some comments out there. Mr. Pauls.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, I thought we were told last week that the total for this is $170,000. That means everything that was done, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Nobody here.
Bob Stubbe, Public Works. I'm not sure I know what the total is, and Heather, do you know what the total is yet as far as what's come through? Okay.
Yeah, they said that last week. In other words, so we still have more coming in other than the 170,000? Is that what I'm?
No, those were,
He said that's what has been expended this year.
And I'm assuming that means everybody.
we just haven't seen the rest of them.
We haven't
Okay.
seen the rest of them yet.
You know, I'll listen to what you have to say, Councilwoman Melton, because I think you're right. It was on us because we did accept that bid. We did accept that bid.
I believe I didn't ask the right questions as to, okay, if I have your average house in Omaha, how much am I gonna get billed if I accidentally go out of town and forget to have somebody, or I thought I had somebody shoveling and then the kid didn't show up and now I've got $1,000.
Well, they said, I think $6 a linear foot, which I about fell out over, is something similar to that. But that money has already been paid by the city, is that?
Yes.
By the taxpayer, right. See, so I don't know how we can, but I'll work with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Palermo.
Mr. President, I just wanted to say again that this is the exact reason why I voted no for each and every one of those people who came before us. I understand it's paid by the taxpayer. I understand it was only bid. There was definitely a problem with this. Now, we have to adjust and moving forward, so I don't know if this is it or not, but one of us did vote no all along. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jerem.
Yes, it's my position, we know the total from Mr. Kleffner, who testified last week, is what was expended by the taxpayers. It's not the city. The government doesn't, come up with money that it isn't paid into by the taxpayers, and that includes taxpayers in all our districts. They have now paid for the maintenance, albeit at what would appear to be an unusually exorbitantly high fee, which I think we need to improve going forward, but we were all well aware of it. In fact, we all requested that the rates be published. There were media stories on it, and everyone was warned about it. So given all of that information, the fact that I don't feel like I or anyone I represent in District 3 who pays taxes should have to pay for those who don't shovel their walks. And that's what's happened. That's the situation. The people who have not cleared their walks have placed us in. And the taxpayers that we represent place them in that position. Now, if we want to have a new policy going forward, I think that I'm all ears. I've talked to Franklin Thompson, the Human Rights and Relations Director, and I was like, it just seems like a perfect opportunity for these small emerging small businesses who do the small construction jobs for our city to help keep them busy year-round. Why don't we reach out to and solicit and interest and encourage them to bid these things? So I think there are opportunities moving forward, and I think if, as a council, we get bids that high again, I mean, we may make a vote as a body. It's foreseeable to me that the bids are all rejected. So we've told the Public Works, we don't want you waiting till the end of the year to come to us with what the rates are going to be, or even anywhere near close. Leave time so that you have these, the flexibility. But I think as it stands right now, I do view what you did as a substitute motion. I do view it as properly on the table. I make substitute motions myself. I'd be kind of silly if I were inconsistent in that regard. So it's my view, not being the parliamentarian, but the clerk and the city attorney are, that it is a proper motion, and we should vote on it, whether to lay this over or not. If it passes, then it gets laid over. If it doesn't, then we take up the original motion that's on the table, as I see it.
Yes, that's the procedure, I would think, right? Okay. Mr. Pauls, you have something?
Thank you. But see, I think by us laying it over, it's going to give it more notoriety. It's going to be out there more to the public. They're going to say, whoa, maybe I ought to apply for that next snow job next year. I think we're drawing more attention to it by doing what you want to do, because people, why are they doing that? You know, I think it's a motivating factor. It's called being an entrepreneur, or advertising, that kind of stuff.
Don't get too deep.
So that's the substitute motion to lay it over 1 week, so we can at least have a draft of what a future plan would be. And I understand that, and you can either lay it over, or we can take a vote today, but that's my substitute motion.
Okay. We have a substitute motion to lay over for 1 week. It's been moved and seconded.
No, we need a second.
We don't have a second.
Second,
No, I
okay.
thought Mr. Pauls did second it, yeah. Oh, he did now. It's been moved and seconded to lay over 1 week, substitute motion, roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-1. Item 63, a resolution to approve the contract offer of the Civilian Management Professional Technical Employees Council of the City of Omaha for contract year 2018.
Public hearing agenda item number 63 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Moved and seconded to deny. No further lights. Roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 64, an ordinance approving a service agreement with Barnacle Parking Enforcement for services related to the Barnacle Parking Enforcement System in the amount of $17,600.
Public hearing agenda item number 64 is today. Proponents, please.
Ken Smith, Public Works, here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Jerem.
Right, I think that this is something we should talk about so that hopefully, I know there's only the newsprint media. Thank God there's still a newsprint media in Omaha. There's one less in New Orleans, I read, but there's still one in Omaha. The Public Works Committee had a briefing on this, and this is a pretty different approach to how what the city considers the scofflaw, non-parking ticket payor is handled in terms of their vehicle. It'll actually cover the windshield, and so they're unable to actually see, and they think it's a more effective and safer way than to have people who maybe had a tire clawed, who maybe they didn't see and then tried to drive and caused damage to their vehicle. If you can't see that your windshield has one of these obnoxious things on it, then you're, I think, visually impaired and shouldn't be driving in the first place, maybe. So, unless there's anything to add on that, I just thought I'd let people know there's a big change coming in what they're going to see on their car if they don't pay their tickets.
Thank you. There are no further lights. Next item.
Item 65, an ordinance to amend portions of Chapter 36 of the Omaha Municipal Code entitled Traffic to amend and clarify various provisions of this chapter.
Public hearing agenda item number 65 is today. Proponents, please.
Ken Smith, Public Works, here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, are there any opponents who wish to be heard? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
Item 66, an ordinance to accept the bid of Payless Office Products to provide janitorial supplies for the Omaha Fire Department for 1 year at a total cost of $27,879.08.
Public hearing agenda item number 66 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Next item.
Non-action items, items 67 through 71, do not require public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on the agenda for consideration.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, roll call.
Melton. Pauls. Palermo. Festerson. Harding. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Meeting is adjourned at 5:14.